This is a compilation of over 3 hours of fighting game character lore explained. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with every Tekken character explained and ranked. Tekken's roster is packed with fighters carrying intense backstories, unique fighting styles, and fierce rivalries that have defined the series for decades. From underdogs chasing dreams to ruthless warriors wielding legendary powers, each character brings something special to the King of Iron Fist tournament. Let's kick things off by diving into the fast-paced, Bruce Lee-inspired energy of one of Tekken's most enduring underdogs, Martial Law. Martial Law is basically Tekken's love letter to Bruce Lee, from his lightning-fast strikes to the yellow jumpsuit nod in Tekken 6's Scenario campaign and his Jeet Kune Do-inspired style. But unlike a classic martial arts hero, Law's story is way more relatable. He's an underdog hustling to keep his struggling dojo open while chasing bigger dreams and debts. His motivation? Paying off what he owes and supporting his family, about as far from world domination as you get here. Before you dismiss him as a joke, hear me out. Sure, he's got a comedic side, failed restaurant attempts with Paul Phoenix, family drama. But in the ring, Law is forceful. His moveset is a fast, aggressive rushdown mixed with smooth stance shifts that can catch opponents off guard. He's accessible, not the easiest but perfect for players who want solid rewards for practice. In competitive play, Law usually lands mid-tier. Not often the top pick, but respected for versatility and speed. Lore-wise, he's the scrappy fighter in Mishima's shadow who still commands respect for grit and skill. If you think Law's story is good, just wait until you meet his hot-headed best friend and rival, Paul Phoenix. Paul Phoenix is the all-American brawler, loud, proud, and radiating an arrogant confidence that borders on cockiness. But here's the twist. He's also notoriously unlucky, whether missing the final round because he got stuck in traffic or falling asleep before a big fight. Paul's life is a comedy of errors wrapped in raw biceps and bravado. But don't mistake that for weakness. He's a powerhouse who keeps bouncing back despite his misfortunes, making him one of Tekken's most enduring characters. His rivalry and friendship with Martial Law is legendary. Part buddy, part foe. This fuels both hilarious antics and serious competition. Paul's iconic Death Fist move, a lunging punch that can obliterate opponents, is a trademark from day one and still a core part of his toolkit. Mechanically, he's beginner-friendly with a twist. His straightforward strikes let new players jump in easily, but mastering his spacing and timing rewards skilled players with real depth. Rank-wise, Paul often sits above Law. In the canon, he's a more credible threat, trading blows with the best despite his streak of bad luck. Competitively, Paul's toolkit is simple but powerful, and many tournaments prove his potential when used expertly. The mix of raw power and misadventure keeps Paul relevant decade after decade. But if you think Paul's blend of muscle and misfortune is something, wait until you meet King. King isn't just a masked Mexican pro wrestler, he's Tekken's moral grappler, carrying the weight of an orphanage on his shoulders. The original King's story is one of redemption and charity, entering the King of Iron Fist tournament not for glory, but to secure funds for the kids he cares about. That mantle passes on to a successor trained by the mysterious Armor King, turning King into a legacy instead of just a single fighter. It's one of Tekken's rare storylines where compassion fuels the fight, even if the brutal wrestling moves tell a tougher tale. In battle, King specializes in complex chain throws and command grabs that punish every failed tech break. His moveset demands heavy execution, attracting grappler fans willing to master multi-step sequences like the giant swing and rolling death cradle. The hours players spend perfecting King's command grabs show just how technical he can get when squeezing max damage. But don't mistake him for a simple brawler. His real danger comes from his punishing throw game and close-range mind games. Rank-wise, King sits in the mid to lower tiers of Tekken's competitive scene. His story feels heartfelt but doesn't shape the world like the Mishimas or Devil Gene carriers. In tournaments, he can be deadly if mastered, but his throw-centric style can be a double-edged sword once opponents adapt. Some origins around King and Armor King remain vague, keeping him in a medium-strength mystery zone. But if you think this masked hero's mix of heart and wrestling chops is interesting, wait until you meet the fiery Taekwondo rival next, Hwoarang. Hwoarang is Tekken's fiery Taekwondo specialist, known for relentless stance switching and a rivalry that burns hotter than most. Before you write him off as just a flashy kick machine, hear me out. He's got serious depth. Narratively, Hwoarang is the rebellious bad boy from South Korea, obsessed with surpassing Jin Kazama. That rivalry gives his story real weight beyond tournament wins. In combat, he commands respect effect with a dizzying array of stance-heavy kickstrings. His left and right flamingo stances let him chain complex combos, mixing highs, mids, and lows to keep opponents guessing. If Tekken's combos are tough, mastering Hwoarang's stance transitions is next level. He's one of the most execution-heavy characters on the roster. The payoff? Relentless pressure that rewards precise timing and spacing. Rank-wise, he's consistently mid to high tier, not the absolute top dog, but always competitive. His military background, complete with an eye patch earned in battle, adds layers beyond the hothead persona. Here's where it gets interesting. Despite his drive to destroy Jin, there's a grudging respect in some storylines. His complicated feelings make him less villain, more conflicted fighter, one of Tekken's emotionally richest characters. The community's split. Beginners fear his stance pressure, while specialists thrive on it. Mastering Hwoarang is a badge of honor, but if you think his kick chaos is wild, wait until we dive into Ling Xiaoyu's energetic escapades next. Ling Xiaoyu. Ling Xiaoyu is the cheerful Chinese martial artist way more dangerous than her bubbly smile suggests. Narratively, she's this energetic young fighter dreaming of building her own amusement park. But beneath that innocence lies a deep emotional connection to Jin Kazama. She truly believes she can save him from the devil Jin's dark influence, making her more than a lighthearted side character. She's a key emotional anchor in the Mishima saga. Before you write her off as just cute and annoying, hear me out. Xiaoyu's playstyle perfectly matches her story. She's slippery and evasive. Her signature stances let her weave in and out like a whirlwind, especially the Art of Phoenix stance, which lets her sidestep attacks, duck under highs, and approach from unexpected angles that look more like dancing than fighting. It's not just showmanship, it's meant to frustrate opponents by making her incredibly hard to pin down. Her movement is fluid and deceptively tricky, rewarding players who master her stance transitions and timing. This high skill ceiling lets Xiaoyu outmaneuver foes who underestimate her, turning playful footwork into lethal pressure. In early Tekken games like Tekken 3, she dominated tournaments and earned a spot in the S tier with Jin and Ogre. Balance changes have since moved her into upper mid tier. Still strong and feared, but with counters catching up. What really sets Xiaoyu apart is how her story importance lines up with her competitive relevance. She's not just a fan favorite mascot. She's canonically vital for her role trying to save Jin and disrupt the Mishima Zaibatsu. That significance plus strong tournament history makes her a fighter who's both emotionally and technically compelling. But if you think her evasive style is wild, wait until you hear about the unpredictable ninja leader, Yoshimitsu. Yoshimitsu is Tekken's ultimate wildcard, a shadowy ninja leader whose motives blur the line between hero and chaos. He heads the Manji clan, a group stealing from corrupt profiteers to redistribute wealth, making him part vigilante, part trickster. The twist? He wields a cursed sword that grants power, but also sometimes wounds him through its attacks. Before you write him off as just flashy, Yoshimitsu's story runs deep. He's more than a thief. He operates in moral gray zones, sabotaging groups like the Mishima Zaibatsu and walking the line between savior and menace. His body is a mystery too. Different incarnations hint Yoshimitsu might be a title or legacy passed down, not one immortal man. In battle, his gameplay matches the weirdness of his story. His moveset has teleportation, hovering spins, and self-damaging strikes, like the infamous suicide stab. These risky attacks hit hard but drain his health, forcing players to balance offense with survival. His style is niche, favored by specialists who love mind games and unpredictability. Competitively, that puts him mid-tier, above Xiaoyu, but below top Mishimas or Brian. Here's where it gets weirder. His cursed sword and regenerating body fuel fan theories. He's more supernatural than human, adding a mystique few rivals match. This blend of mystery and longevity keeps him a fan favorite, even if his complex mechanics hold him back from the highest ranks. Yoshimitsu is the chaotic ninja who defies simple labels. His moral ambiguity and unique style make him a standout in Tekken's roster. But if you think he's wild, wait till we get to Nina Williams, the cold-blooded assassin. Nina Williams is the cold, calculating assassin everyone knows, an Irish killer literally frozen in time. Before you roll your eyes at the just another assassin trope, hear me out. Nina's not just lethal, she's a canonical powerhouse with a personal vendetta, a bitter rivalry with her sister Anna, all while preserved in cryogenic stasis, keeping her youthful as others age. Officially, Nina works as a hired gun for world powers like the Mishima Zaibatsu, targeting key players like Kazuya Mishima. She even appears in Tekken, the motion picture, as an assassin hired to take down Kazuya. That's just the surface. On the battlefield, Nina is known for insane execution combos, ruthless pressure, and punishing mids. Her down forward 2 is a trusted mid counter hit launcher with counter hit tools that turn light hits into devastating combos. Here's where it gets interesting. Mastering Nina means memorizing multiple punish windows and frame-specific options. The difference between a light jab and a massive punish can be a single frame. This technical ceiling turns her into a pressure-heavy assassin for precision lovers. She's no button masher's dream, but skilled players unleash relentless offense. Unlike Yoshimitsu's flashy unpredictability, Nina dominates with cold, calculated combos. Ranked by strength and story, Nina sits above Yoshimitsu, but below Mishima heavyweights. She's a solid mid to high tier pick, famously hard to master, but hugely rewarding. Canonically, her cryogenic state has her battling through eras, a deadly constant in the Mishima saga. Beneath that icy shell is a fierce, sisterly conflict, proving she's more than just an assassin stereotype. But if Nina's cold and precise intimidates you, wait until you meet the fiery new player coming next, Reina. Reina is the fresh blood shaking up the Mishima dynasty, and she's already stirring up more than just drama. As a Tekken 8 newcomer, she enters the ring not just as a student at Mishima Polytechnical School, but as someone who believes Heihachi Mishima might be her father. That's a big deal. The possibility of an illegitimate heir threatens to rewrite the entire family narrative and power structure. But here's the kicker. Her motives remain shrouded in mystery, leaving fans guessing whether she's an ally, a pawn, or something far more dangerous. Gameplay-wise, Reina's a Mishima-style hybrid with that classic aggressive toolkit. She blends electrics, wave dash techniques, and high-impact strings, but with a twist that feels both fresh and fiercely technical. Initial impressions show her as a fast, explosive fighter who rewards precision and punishes hesitation. The frame data is still being dissected, but early competitive results place her tier somewhere above Nina Williams. Though with thinner evidence since she's brand new, players highlight her adaptability and damage output, suggesting she's poised for future meta climbs. Narratively and competitively, Reina is positioned as a serious contender, not just in the tournament, but potentially the future face of the Mishima conflict. She's the wildcard with the most untapped potential, standing at the edge of the dynasty's power struggles, with all eyes on what she'll do next. But if you think Reina's mysterious rise is surprising, wait until we get to Bryan Fury, the literal embodiment of chaos and cybernetic destruction. Bryan Fury. Bryan Fury is Tekken's walking nightmare, a cybernetic zombie ex-cop who's thrown all morality out the window and fully embraced chaos and violence. Before you write him off as just another brute, hear me out. He's literally the embodiment of destruction with a mechanical twist, designed to wreck anything that stands in his way. Once a police detective, Bryan was brutally killed, and then reanimated by Dr. Abel with cybernetic enhancements, turning him into a relentless force with superhuman strength and durability. On the battlefield, Bryan plays like a heavy-hitting wrecking ball. He's not about flashy combos or intricate mix-ups. He thrives on raw power, wall carry, and aggressive pressure. His moveset includes brutal mid-attacks that launch opponents and allow for devastating follow-ups, especially when they're trapped against the wall. His taunt setups aren't just for show, they reset pressure situations and guarantee follow-ups that can quickly turn the tide of a round. Bryan dominated the Tekken 5 meta, with Korean tier lists putting him comfortably in S tier alongside the likes of Heihachi and Devil Jin. That era cemented his reputation as one of the scariest characters to face in high-level play. But here's where it gets even weirder. Bryan isn't just strong, he's an unstoppable nightmare fueled by nihilism. He doesn't fight for honor or revenge. He fights because he revels in destruction itself. This ruthless mentality shows in his aggressive style. No hesitation, no mercy, just pure overwhelming force. Compared to newer entrants like Reina, Bryan feels like a monstrous titan from another age, with a competitive legacy that still holds weight decades later. So yeah, Bryan Fury is not just a cyborg with a mean punch. He's the living definition of chaos incarnate in Tekken's universe. But if you think that's intense, wait till you see Heihachi Mishima's Iron Will next. Heihachi Mishima. Heihachi Mishima is the iron-fisted despot whose ambitions shape the entire King of Iron Fist tournament legacy. Before you dismiss him as just a grumpy old man throwing family off cliffs, hear me out. Heihachi is not only the ruthless patriarch of the Mishima clan, but also the cold corporate overlord controlling the Mishima Zaibatsu with zero mercy. Narratively, Heihachi's story is all about power, control, and family tyranny. He's the man who threw his son Kazuya off a cliff to test his strength, sparked brutal tournament wars, and shaped decades of conflict. His relentless quest to maintain dominance, both in the boardroom and on the battlefield, makes him a character you either admire for sheer tenacity or hate for absolute cruelty. On the battlefield, Heihachi uses classic Mishima karate with deadly precision. His toolkit revolves around electrics, the infamous electric wind, God Fist, and potent mid-attacks that punish hesitation like a guillotine. His moves are simple, but demand precise execution, especially when mastering his wave dashes and punishing strings. Though not as flashy as Kazuya or Jin, his strong mids and consistent damage make him a formidable force. Heihachi's high execution ceiling means only dedicated players unlock his full potential. When they do, he controls fight pacing, punishes almost every mistake, and racks up damage quickly. His competitive standing is historically high tier, appearing in top tournament play and tier lists near the pinnacle. Always a threat, but rarely the absolute strongest, stuck just below his Devil Gene kin. Here's where it gets dark. Heihachi's brutal leadership is more than a family squabble. His grip on Mishima Zaibatsu fuels wars, experiments, and tragedy, making him a catalyst for chaos. But if you think the Iron Fist is scary, wait until you meet the tortured grandson trying to break the cycle. Next up, Jin Kazama. Jin Kazama. Jin Kazama stands as Tekken's ultimate tragic hero, wielding immense power yet constantly battling the darkness within. Before you think of him as just another overpowered fighter, hear me out. Jin's story is a roller coaster of grief, hope, and inner conflict that shapes everything about his fighting style and legacy. On the surface, Jin merges Mishima and Kazama fighting styles, creating a hybrid that combines the brutal electric strikes of the Mishimas with the defensive parries and counters of the Kazama lineage. This isn't your average one-dimensional character. Jin's toolkit includes strong neutral control, versatile mids, and the ability to punish nearly every mistake with devastating precision. Jin's canonical feats solidify his status. He's the only one to have defeated Azazel, a colossal and otherworldly threat, essentially saving the world at immense personal cost. This narrative frames Jin as the conflicted savior, wielding the cursed Devil Gene power he desperately wants to suppress. His journey oscillates between using that power for destruction and seeking peace, which resonates deeply with fans who see him as more than just a fighter. He's the embodiment of inner struggle. Competitively, Jin quickly rose to S-tier prominence in early Tekken entries, dominating tournaments with his balanced offense and defense. Unlike many Mishimas, Jin's use of parries adds a layer of complexity that rewards patient players ready to punish aggression. Throughout the series, he's maintained a top-tier position, consistently a favorite pick at high-level play, which backs up his narrative role with actual tournament results. But here's where it gets complicated. Jin's internal war with the Devil Gene often leads to catastrophic outcomes, making him a hero desperate for control, but sometimes a harbinger of destruction. It's this duality that cements him as one of Tekken's most compelling figures, always powerful, always torn. If you thought Jin's struggle was intense, just wait until we dive into the dark legacy of the Mishima patriarch, Kazuya. Kazuya Mishima. Kazuya Mishima is the ultimate Tekken powerhouse, an anti-hero turned ruthless villain who fully embraces the Devil Gene and commands the might of G Corporation. He started as the original rebel son, thrown off a cliff by his father Heihachi in a brutal test of strength, only to return possessed by demonic power and burning vengeance. Over the series, Kazuya evolves from tormented fighter to global warlord, embodying merciless ambition and unstoppable force. Before you dismiss him as just another Mishima, hear me out. Kazuya's signature style is demanding Mishima karate, an intimidating blend of precision strikes, electrics, and punishing combos that requires top-tier execution. The infamous crouch dash, electric wind, God Fist, and bone-crushing hell sweeps aren't just flashy moves. They're core to his dominance in both story and competitive play. Skilled players know how brutal his wave dash and counter hit setups can be, tearing through defenses with speed and intent. Narratively, Kazuya's full control of the Devil Gene sets him apart. Unlike Jin, who struggles with his powers, Kazuya embraces his demon side completely, transforming into a literal devil incarnate that radiates menace. On top of that, his leadership of G Corporation gives him vast armies and resources, making him a warlord few can match. His unrelenting vendetta against Heihachi and Jin drives major story arcs, placing him atop Tekken's dark hierarchy of power and corruption. In competitive terms, Kazuya consistently ranks among the elite. His electrics and hell sweep mix-ups are nightmare fuel, and his ability to punish mistakes with massive combos keeps him top tier across Tekken's history. While his execution barrier is high, not everyone can tame the Mishima dance. Those who master it wield arguably the most potent fighter on the roster. Here's the thing, Kazuya isn't just a fighter, he's Tekken's ultimate threat. Demon King and Ruthless CEO combined into one terrifying package. No other character matches his narrative dominance and gameplay power. And with that, this wraps up our ranking of every major Tekken fighter, putting the original Devil firmly at the top. From ancient clans to cosmic horrors, the Tekken series has unleashed some of the most legendary and terrifying monsters in gaming history. These aren't just fighters, they're the dark heart of the Mishima bloodline, conflict, and beyond. To begin this journey, we dive into the original family betrayal that set the entire Mishima demonic legacy in motion, decades before anyone had ever heard of a King of Iron Fist tournament. Jinpachi Mishima. Jinpachi Mishima is the original Mishima patriarch, a tragic figure consumed by his own family's betrayal. Before becoming a demon, he led the Mishima Zaibatsu until his son Heihachi overthrew and imprisoned him beneath the Hanmaru dojo. Left to starve, Jinpachi's body and mind twisted into a monstrous fusion of Mishima-style fighting karate and raw demonic fury. Before you dismiss him as just another demon boss, hear me out. Jinpachi isn't simple demon flavor stuck on a familiar fighter. His transformation was the first time the Mishima story turned human cruelty into outright supernatural horror. Long before the devil gene appeared, he embodies ancestral corruption, the festering root of all Mishima madness. His glowing third eye, bound torso, and tortured moves scream cursed lineage. In gameplay, Jinpachi punishes mistakes like no other. His fireballs and stun attacks force players to focus or get wiped out, and his brutal demonic moves expand Tekken's fighting style into otherworldly territory. His stun attack even foreshadows Azazel's later abilities, showing his boss design laid the foundation for Tekken's cosmic horrors. Jinpachi isn't just powerful, he's a brutal test of pattern recognition and patience. Not a button masher's boss. Here's where it gets dark. Jinpachi's story symbolizes the Mishima family's original sin of betrayal and decay. His fall from patriarch to starving demon shows how ambition corrupted the clan from within, turning the founder into a tragic cautionary figure and precursor to threats like Azazel. He bridges the family's human tragedy and the series' supernatural shift from political power struggles to demonic warfare. So while Jinpachi may seem like a one-off demon boss, he's the keystone of Tekken's monstrous legacy. His suffering foreshadows the cursed line through Heihachi, Kazuya, and Jin, linking family betrayal with unleashed powers. In that very same fallout, his son's marriage was about to unleash a threat even more directly tied to the devil gene, his daughter-in-law, Kazumi. Kazumi Mishima. Kazumi Mishima is the unexpected origin of the Mishima family's devil gene. Even before Tekken 1, she's already in play as a secret weapon from the Hachijo clan, a family that harnesses demonic power for targeted assassinations. Kazumi isn't just Heihachi's loving wife, she's an assassin bound by her clan's ruthless mission. Her transformation into Devil Kazumi and her attempt to kill Heihachi kickstarted the Mishima feud's demonic legacy, spanning generations. Here's the kicker, Kazumi isn't random chaos. She embodies the dark duality of tender mother and genetically weaponized villain. She carries the devil gene inherited from the Hachijo clan, passing this curse to her son Kazuya and triggering the family's demonic spiral. This contrasts sharply with the Kazama clan's angel gene, providing a spiritual counterpoint in the series. Her boss fight in Tekken 7 captures this blend perfectly. Devil Kazumi teleports and hovers, firing laser eyes and dark energy attacks that upend typical fighting game patterns. She's not just a brawler, she's a demon unleashed, moving like a shadow you can't predict. Narratively, Kazumi's role is tragic. She truly loves Heihachi, but is forced by clan doctrine to kill him if he becomes a threat. This mission is deeply personal and brutal, making her the perfect origin for the series' supernatural conflict. Without her fateful choice, the Mishimas wouldn't be cursed by endless demonic power struggles. If Kazumi's devil legacy seems wild, wait until you see how it grows with her son. Next up is Devil Kazuya. Devil Kazuya. Kazuya. Mishima's story is the brutal origin of the devil gene's deadly hold on the Mishima family. He inherits the devil gene from his mother, Kazumi, who already possessed it long before him. But it's his father Heihachi's cruel test that triggers the demon inside. Heihachi throws Kazuya off a cliff. Expecting him to die, But instead, the trauma forces the devil gene to fully awaken, forging a dark pact between Kazuya and the devil entity within him. This isn't just a genetic curse. It's the moment Kazuya becomes the ruthless demon host that defines the Tekken saga. Devil Kazuya's boss fights are a hellish mix of raw Mishima karate and otherworldly powers. He flies, shoots energy beams, and shocks opponents with electric attacks that go beyond human limits. His aggressive blend of martial arts and demonic abilities pushes players to their edge, embodying his transformation from abused child to unstoppable force. Early Tekken finales made it clear. This isn't just a man fighting, it's a vessel for pure demonic fury. But here's where it gets darker. Kazuya isn't only a demon physically. His internal battle with Angel, a spiritual counterforce symbolizing his remaining humanity and moral struggle, runs throughout the series. This clash isn't just about power, it's a supernatural representation of his torn soul between good and evil. The Mishima feud explodes from a family tragedy into a global war with Kazuya at its center, using his devil power to ignite massive corporate conflicts and bloodshed. This fusion of childhood trauma and demonic pact makes Devil Kazuya one of Tekken's most iconic monsters. He's not just a villain, he's the human price of a dark, inherited curse pushed to terrifying extremes. And if you think a devilish son is bad, just wait until you meet the ancient extraterrestrial force he's forced to fight next. Ogre isn't just another Tekken villain, he's a cosmic escalation, the first major antagonist outside the Mishima bloodline to shake the series' foundations. Dubbed the God of Fighting, Ogre is basically an ancient extraterrestrial living weapon, dropped on Earth by alien beings eons ago as the ultimate combat tool. Unlike your everyday martial artist, Ogre has the freaky ability to absorb and mimic fighting styles. He literally studies you mid-fight and turns your moves against you. This guy represents a new tier of threat, not just a fighter, but a shifting monster of pure combat evolution. Before you write him off as just another final boss, hear me out. Ogre's arrival in Tekken 3 moved the plot beyond the Mishima's family drama into something cosmic. He's a being weaponized to control Earth's martial legacy, almost like an alien guardian designed to test and conquer every fighting style known to humanity. His boss fight isn't just about landing blows. It's survival against an adaptive predator. He uses long reach and unpredictable patterns that force players to constantly switch tactics, making every encounter nerve-wracking and dynamic. Narratively, Ogre's impact runs deep. He's the one who attacked Jun Kazama, leaving her gravely wounded, which forced her to retreat to the secluded Kazama Sanctuary. This brutal encounter is key, as it indirectly sets off a chain of events leading to Jin Kazama's Devil Gene awakening. Ogre's alien menace blends with the family curse that Tekken fans obsess over, raising the stakes beyond just human grudges. Plus, while Ogre shares the supernatural side of Tekken's lore, there's no official connection tying him directly to characters like Claudio. Any links are more thematic than canonical. Ogre thus isn't just a cosmic wildcard, he's the first real monster boss in Tekken, a living weapon that warps the game's tone from gritty martial arts to survival against an alien god. If you thought the Mishima blood feud was intense, Ogre brings a whole new level. A war machine made to end all war machines, constantly learning and evolving on the battlefield. But if you think Ogre is brutal, wait until you meet True Ogre. True Ogre isn't just Ogre's upgraded form. It's the monstrous, dragon-like evolution that cranks the alien war machine threat to 11. While Ogre starts out as a humanoid living weapon designed to absorb and mimic fighters, True Ogre steps it up with massive horns, a serpentine tail, giant wings, and a towering bestial frame that makes it feel less like a fighter and more like a colossal elemental war god unleashed. Here's the thing, True Ogre's arsenal is a brutal mix of myth and boss fight classics. His fire breath alone isn't just for style, it serves as a sweeping zoning attack that blankets the arena, forcing players to rethink positioning or face serious damage. Add in savage tail sweeps that have nearly unblockable properties, and you've got a boss fight that's less about traditional Tekken footsies and more a test of survival against environmental hazards. Trying to poke or counterattack without paying attention can get you burned or crushed. It's like fighting a rampaging dinosaur who's also mastered street fighting. Before you object, I can prove True Ogre's impact goes beyond just a tough fight. His multi-phase battle style, starting as Ogre, then evolving mid-fight into this massive, more aggressive form, laid down the blueprint for all the big monster bosses that followed. Azazel's overwhelming scale, screen-wide attacks, and multi-stage pattern clearly draw from True Ogre's design philosophy. It's the shift from humanoid villain to something cosmic and territorial. Lore-wise, True Ogre acts as a key bridge. He blends the extraterrestrial alien menace embodied by Ogre with the later demonic cosmic threats like Azazel. This fusion shows the Tekken series expanding its monster scale from tactical humanoids into elemental war gods. True Ogre represents a primal power surge locked in raw, destructive form, but refined with intelligence and tactical combat skills. It's war machines mixed with mythic fury. In short, True Ogre personifies the monstrous evolution of Tekken's alien archetype. From absorbing martial artists as Ogre to becoming an unstoppable dragon hybrid, he turns the final boss arena into a battlefield littered with fiery breath and tail-whipping hazards. This isn't a fighter you simply beat with combos. It's a legendary elemental force that redefined what a Tekken monster boss could be. But if you think True Ogre's dramatic boss fight is big, wait until we get to Unknown, and her shifting water-like terror twisting the rules entirely. Unknown is the ultimate wildcard in Tekken's Rogues Gallery of Monsters, a non-canon boss lurking on the edges of the main storyline, yet packed with layers of spiritual mystique that stick with you. She's connected to Jun Kazama, but not as you know her. Instead, Unknown is Jun possessed by a corrupted wolf spirit, turning her into a fluid, water-like being whose fighting style is a slippery, unpredictable nightmare. Before you shrug off non-canon bosses, hear me out. Unknown enriches the Tekken mythos in ways no canon character quite does. She embodies the fragile line between human will and spiritual corruption, a possession gone terribly wrong. The lore here leans heavily on the tag tournament games, where she first shows up as the final boss, and returns with full force in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Her essence is a dark echo of Jun's angelic nature, twisted into something alien and menacing. Her moveset is a shapeshifter's dream, Unknown, morphs constantly, stealing other fighters' techniques while surrounded by a shadowy water form that looks part ghost, part liquid nightmare. Fighting her demands adapting to sudden changes and attacks that slip through normal hitboxes. It's all about unpredictability and spiritual unease, adding depth. Unknown's story ties to the wolf spirit corrupting Jun, but it's not the result of Claudio Serafino's exorcisms. Claudio's battles happen much later, facing the devil gene and other demons. Unknown's origin stays more mysterious, tied directly to Jun's spiritual corruption rather than any failed exorcism. This keeps Unknown as a unique symbol of chaos in Tekken's spiritual lore, both victim and enforcer. Though outside the main timeline, her story threads explore possession, failed redemption, and the volatile mix of human and beyond human power. She's less a simple extra, more a spiritual wildcard who brings a chilling, mystical edge to the series. But if you thought Unknown's watery horrors were tough to pin down, wait until we dive into the ancient cosmic menace sealed beneath the earth. Azazel is basically the cosmic boss of the Tekken universe, the ultimate demon sealed underground, long before anyone heard of the Mishimas or their devil gene drama. The prophecy says, Azazel will awaken when human conflict, specifically the chaos wrought by devil gene wars, reaches its peak and Tekken 6 delivers exactly that. So, Azazel isn't just another monster. It's the apocalypse incarnate, the reason all the devil hosts' struggles have cosmic stakes. Before you think it's just a big demon for the final boss, hear me out. The narrative literally positions Azazel as the central link connecting every devil gene carrier. It's not just a big bad, it's the catalyst. The primal source that's been dormant, waiting for humanity to tear itself apart enough to break its seal. Jin's global war against Kazuya? That's basically Azazel's alarm clock. The boss fight itself is a beast of many layers and references. Azazel throws down this barrage of crystal spikes shooting up from the ground, making your movement feel restricted, as if the earth itself is betraying you. Then, there are those crystal scarabs swarming the stage as projectiles, forcing players to juggle dodging and offense simultaneously. And its ranged beams? Think of the devil lasers from Kazuya and Devil Jin, fused with True Ogre's fire breath stun attacks. Azazel synthesizes all those intimidating boss traits into one overwhelming foe. It's like the game said, let's throw every terrifying mechanic from past bosses into this ready-made endgame hell, and narratively, Azazel is the key to everything. It's not only the final force Jin aims to confront to end the Devil Gene curse, but also reappears in Tekken 8, where its lingering influence catalyzes Kazuya's True Devil transformation. A nod that the apocalypse isn't over once you beat the giant demon once. It's a cyclical, cosmic nightmare that keeps escalating. So, Azazel isn't just a monster boss. It embodies centuries of demonic war, sealed evil unleashed by humanity's own bloodline madness. If you think that's the end of the deep devil stuff, wait until you see who carries the Devil Gene's legacy forward: Devil Jin. Devil Jin is the twisted apex of Jin Kazama's internal struggle, the fully unleashed manifestation of the Devil Gene coursing through his bloodline. But here's the catch: he isn't just another Mishima-style fighter with a demonic twist. Devil Jin fuses Jin's sharp, precise Mishima karate with terrifying supernatural powers like flights and devastating laser beams. This isn't just a fighter who punches harder, he becomes a flying, laser-shooting demon lord in the arena. Before you dismiss him as another generic devil boss, hear me out. Devil Jin represents the next generation caught in the Mishima curse, the collision of raw devil power inherited from Kazuya and the Kazama clan's spiritual resistance rooted in Jun. This duality is written all over his gameplay. He's incredibly mobile, using wings to soar and instantly close distance, and his lasers punish overextensions from a safe range. His combos hit hard and fast, demanding players master timing and spacing, reflecting the relentless psychological battle he wages internally. His lore ties deeply into Tekken's ultimate apocalyptic arc. Devil Jin's transformation is triggered by his connection to Azazel, the ancient demon whose awakening Jin hopes to provoke and then destroy to end the Devil Gene curse. So Devil Jin is not just a monster, but also a tactical weapon in Jin's dangerous gamble, embodying the destructive inheritance he desperately wants to overcome. What makes Devil Jin so compelling is that he perfectly captures Tekken's core conflict, the devastating seduction of demonic possession versus the flickering hope of angelic potential. He is both victim and vessel, harnessing devastating supernatural menace while fighting to retain his humanity. His fighting style mirrors this balance, blending traditional martial arts with terrifying otherworldly abilities, making every encounter an electric mix of skill and raw power. But if you think Devil Jin's internal torment is intense, wait until we explore Angel Jin, the shining possible redemption, and yin to his infernal yang. Angel Jin is the ultimate angelic opposite to True Devil Kazuya, introduced as Tekken 8's final boss and the climax of the Devil Gene saga. This form represents the Kazama clan's so-called Angel Gene, evolving into a purifying force that directly counters the Devil Gene's destruction. If the Mishima curse is hellfire, Angel Jin is the holy water meant to quench it. Before you write him off as a glowy palette swap, hear me out. Angel Jin's design and moveset scream celestial power, massive radiant wings, attacks combining traditional martial arts with light-based, ethereal abilities. Gameplay footage shows him launching luminous projectiles and delivering swift, precise strikes that feel less brute force and more divine justice. It's like a kung fu priest throwing down with a space demon. Narratively, Angel Jin symbolizes hope. He's the spiritual redemption that might finally end or transform the Devil Gene legacy. His battle with True Devil Kazuya is the ultimate devil versus angel clash, charged with cosmic symbolism. Two polar opposites collide, one infernal destruction, the other angelic salvation. The final boss arena pulses with this metaphysical tension. Here's where it gets interesting. Angel Jin isn't just a deus ex machina. His arrival suggests the Kazama bloodline hosts an ancient angel gene, able to purify or balance the Devil Gene. Jun Kazama and Asuka carry this essence, but Jin's transformation signals the full activation of that potential, making him Tekken's first truly divine warrior. This metaphysical elevation means Tekken 8 closes not with another grim devil master, but a battle where mythology itself feels resolved. Angel Jin's glowing wings and light attacks aren't just flashy. They declare the saga might finally shift from endless curses and bloodshed to redemption and balance. If you thought past bosses were intense, Angel Jin takes it to a divine scale. His presence promises a hopeful endpoint to a storyline mired in chaos. And with his epic fight against True Devil Kazuya, Tekken's tale of demons and angels shows it's about more than martial arts. It's about the fate of supernatural legacies. The Tekken saga is more than brutal fights. It's a tangled web of family curses, demonic powers, and relentless battles for control. Every final boss isn't just a fighter, but a symbol of a deeper struggle shaped by love, betrayal, and ancient forces. Let's start at the very beginning, where a secret mission and a tragic duel set the stage for the Mishima family's dark legacy, Kazumi Mishima. Kazumi Mishima isn't just another fighter in Tekken, she's the origin of the Devil Gene nightmare and the catalyst for decades of family destruction. As part of the Hachiyo clan, Kazumi was born with the Devil Gene, a supernatural curse that infected the Mishima bloodline after she married Heihachi Mishima. Her love for Heihachi was real, but she also had a secret mission: kill him if his ambitions threatened the world. Talk about a complicated marriage. Before you roll your eyes at the tragic love story trope, hear me out. Kazumi's conflict wasn't just emotional, it was a literal battle between love and destiny. When she transformed into Devil Kazumi during their fight in the Mishima Dojo, it wasn't just a power-up. It was the devil gene corrupting her, pushing her to eliminate Heihachi in a brutal, no-holds-barred fight. Heihachi fights back coldly and kills her on the spot, proving even demonic powers don't replace good old punches. That moment, it's the spark that kicks off the Mishima blood. Kazumi's death traumatizes her son Kazuya, setting him on a path of hatred and vengeance. Her disappearance plays a key role in the fall of Jinpachi Mishima and the rise of the Mishima Zaibatsu, the corporate war machine that turns family tragedy into global conflict. The Zaibatsu's power is built on the chaos Kazumi's death unleashed. Here's the kicker. Kazumi's story turns the Devil Gene saga into a clash between love and duty, human emotion and destiny. Her defeat isn't just a mother losing a fight, it's when the Mishima curse turns from hidden threat to violent legacy. Without her death, there'd be no Mishima Empire, no global war, and no endless cycle of betrayal. But if you think that's the end of chaos, wait until you hear how her son Kazuya's descent into devilry unfolds next. Kazuya Mishima. Kazuya Mishima's story is a brutal transformation from a helpless kid to a ruthless avenger driven by a demonic curse. As a child, he faced a deadly test from his father, Heihachi Mishima, who threw him off a cliff to see if he was strong enough to survive. But here's the kicker. The devil gene inside Kazuya awoke at that exact moment, saving him and turning him into something far more dangerous than human. From then on, Kazuya's goal was clear. Get revenge on the father who tried to kill him and seize control of the Mishima Zaibatsu. His ambitions later expanded to rival the G Corporation, dragging him deeper into the bloody corporate and supernatural wars at the heart of Tekken. His devil form, glowing eyes and energy blasts included, became a symbol of his unleashed rage. Kazuya's classic final boss defeat comes in Tekken 2, when Heihachi battles his son once more. After a brutal fight, Heihachi wins, and, in a harsh replay of his own childhood test, throws Kazuya into a boiling volcano. This moment is iconic, not just for its violence, but because it represents the cycle of hatred between father and son. But here's where it gets weird. This defeat isn't permanent. While Kazuya burns in the lava, G Corporation retrieves his remains from the volcanic depths, ensuring the devil gene survives and setting him up for an even deadlier return. The volcano isn't the end, it's just a pause. The tragedy is that Kazuya is trapped in a family curse forged by Heihachi's brutal tests. The attempts to control or destroy the devil gene only preserve it, fueling their endless cycle of destruction. Kazuya isn't just a cast-off son. He's relentless vengeance wrapped in demonic fury, but if you think Kazuya's story is dark, wait until we get into Jun Kazama, the woman who balances him and mothers his son. Jun Kazama stands out in Tekken lore as the moral compass lost in the middle of Mishima chaos. She's the peaceful, protective counterpoint to the Mishima family's endless violence, an environmental officer turned reluctant fighter who ultimately becomes the mother of Jin Kazama. Her story is one of innocence caught in a storm of demonic ambition. Before you roll your eyes thinking she's just a bland, good character, hear me out. Jun's disappearance is one of the most tragically charged moments linked directly to Mishima hubris. After Heihachi awakened the ancient entity Ogre that unleashed a chain reaction none of them could stop, which includes Jun's attack alongside her young son Jin on the remote island of Yakushima. The official story is simple. Jun and Jin are ambushed by Ogre, and in the chaos, she vanishes. Never truly confirmed dead, but effectively erased from Jin's life and the entire saga. But here's where it gets dark. It wasn't just a random monster attack, it was a direct consequence of Heihachi's reckless decision to awaken Ogre in his insane pursuit of power. Jun, the embodiment of pacifism and protection, was collateral damage in the Mishima bloodline's war on itself. Her disappearance fuels the crushing emotional drive behind Jin's journey. It's why he enters the tournament, why he fights with such fury, not just to face Ogre and true Ogre, but to avenge the mother who stood against the darkness yet was swallowed by it anyway. Jun, ambiguous fate, makes her more than a footnote or lost NPC. She's the lingering moral question in a series drenched in betrayal and power struggles. Innocence destroyed by demonic forces, and a missing piece of the Mishima puzzle that keeps Jin's story emotionally resonant and morally complex. But if you think one vanished Kazama sparks enough tragedy, wait until you see the real monster behind it all. Ogre Ogre is the ancient soul-devouring entity that changed everything in the Tekken universe. Awakened by Heihachi's relentless obsession with unlocking supernatural power, Ogre isn't just some random monster, it's the apex of ancient evil that bridges the gap between the Mishima family's brutal power struggles and darker, otherworldly forces. This big bad essentially marks the shift from family drama to full-on demonic horror. Before you think of Ogre as just an old-school boss fight, hear me out. This creature is directly responsible for Jun Kazama's mysterious disappearance. It attacks hunters and fighters, absorbing their souls and fighting styles to grow stronger, which makes it more than just a monster. It's a catalyst for everything that follows in the story. The Mishima bloodline's ambition literally unleashes it on the world, turning personal revenge into a cosmic conflict. Officially, Ogre is awakened by Heihachi after Tekken 2, when the Zaibatsu experiments lead him to uncover this ancient being buried deep in ruins. It shows up first as an imposing boss called Ancient Ogre, wreaking havoc on Jun and others, driving the narrative toward Jin Kazama seeking revenge. Jin's fight with Ogre in Tekken 3 is no casual tournament. It's a reckoning with forces far beyond mortal grudges. Jin, quote, as victory over Ogre, is what triggers the creature's terrifying evolution into True Ogre, a monstrous transformation that raises the stakes even higher. Ogre's defeat isn't an end, it's a dark escalation, signaling that the Mishimas are out of their depth. Ogre represents the first major supernatural hurdle before the series dives headlong into the internal demonic struggles with the devil gene. Here's where it gets weird. Heihachi's attempt to control Ogre backfires spectacularly. By awakening it, he not only loses Jun, but also sets Jin on a path that increasingly entwines with demonic power and family betrayal. Ogre's fall directly leads to True Ogre's rise, which cranks the threat level up exponentially and sets Jin up for a much darker destiny. So, Ogre is basically the Mishima Ambition's Frankenstein monster, born from human greed, but fueled by ancient evil, kicking off the supernatural spiral that the series is famous for. If you think Ogre was intense, wait until you see what happens with True Ogre. True Ogre is the monstrous second form of the ancient entity Ogre in Tekken 3, the fully unleashed version the player faces during the final battle. But here's the kicker. This isn't just some hulking monster, it's a horrifying fusion of all the souls it has consumed, embodying the power and fighting styles of countless fallen warriors. True Ogre represents the destructive accumulation of power, a beast made from the wreckage of everyone who dared to oppose it. Most players remember Jin's clash with True Ogre as the ultimate test of his strength before his devil gene fully awakens. Before you roll your eyes thinking it's just a hard boss fight, hear me out. Jin beats this colossal amalgamation purely through human determination and martial skill. No demonic transformations yet. This was the last stand of Jin's humanity, a symbolic moment where human will overcomes the supernatural horror exactly one time. The fight itself is brutal, with True Ogre sporting wings, a blazing fire breath, and limbs longer than some buildings. Jin weaves through these nightmares with sheer grit, hammering the beast into submission. This victory isn't just a plot checkpoint, it's thematic gold. Jin conquers a monster made from souls likely including previous fighters like Jun Kazama and others lost to Ogre's hunger, proving that it's possible to face the past darkness and win. But here's where it gets weird. Just as Jin's about to breathe relief, Heihachi betrays him, trying to kill Jin right after the fight. This brutal backstab triggers Jin's devil gene to finally awaken, marking the end of Jin's purely human era. The defeat of True Ogre isn't a clean victory, it's a loss in disguise. Jin's heroic act ends up setting the stage for his inner demon to rise, turning the series' conflict inward. True Ogre's downfall marks a pivotal shift in Tekken lore, from vanquishing external ancient threats to battling the internal demonic curse within Jin himself. With Ogre and True Ogre gone, the focus turns to the Mishima family's bloodline horrors that will dominate future tournaments. If you think a composite soul-devouring beast is intense, wait until we get into Jinpachi Mishima's haunted legacy next. Jinpachi Mishima. Jinpachi Mishima is the original head of the Mishima Zaibatsu, a powerful patriarch locked away beneath the Hanmaru dojo by his own son, Heihachi. Sounds like family drama on steroids, right? But it gets worse. While trapped in darkness, Jinpachi is possessed by a demonic spirit, turning him into a terrifying final boss in Tekken 5. This possession twists the once mighty leader into a tragic monster, both victim and villain tangled up in the Mishima curse. Before you write off Jinpachi as just another demon to punch, hear me out. His possession isn't inherited like the infamous devil gene with Kazuya or Jin. It's an outside force corrupting a man already broken by betrayal. That makes Jinpachi unique. He's the ancient Mishima nearly destroyed by obsession, betrayal, and supernatural manipulation, not someone born with dark powers inside. Officially, Jinpachi was locked away after Heihachi's coup for control of the Zaibatsu. Over time, a vengeful spirit infested his prison, warping him into a powerful monster with devilish strength and energy attacks. Players face him atop the old Hanmaru dojo, where he unleashes crushing energy blasts and earth-shaking moves. But here's the kicker. When Jin Kazama finally defeats this possessed great-grandfather, Jinpachi briefly regains his humanity. In a surprisingly tender moment, he thanks Jin for ending his torment before fading away. It's not just a kill, it's a mercy release. This death isn't family cleanup, it's pivotal. Jinpachi's fall clears the path for Jin to rise as Mishima Zaibatsu's new leader, igniting another deadly chapter in the Mishima saga. His death signals the destruction of the old guard, consumed by obsession and possession, replaced by a younger generation ready to drag the world into chaos. What makes this tragedy stick is Jinpachi embodies the Mishima curse's origin, a proud patriarch destroyed not just by blood, but by the darkness unleashed from endless betrayal. Jin's mercy killing shows a flicker of compassion amid relentless violence, hinting humanity isn't lost in this brutal lineage. But if you think possessed ancestors make for complicated bosses, just wait until the next demonic force appears. Azazel is pretty much the demon kingpin behind the whole devil gene mess in Tekken. The colossal crystalline beast, introduced as the final boss of Tekken 6, isn't just another big monster, it's the likely origin of that cursed power infecting the Mishima bloodline, namely the Hachijo clan, where the devil gene started. Jin Kazama's global war isn't just some random fight, it's him trying to awaken Azazel buried deep in a desert temple, hoping to crush the source of the demonic curse once and for all. Before you shrug it off as another boss fight, hear me out. The lore literally ties Azazel's existence to the apocalyptic cycles Tekken's story constantly leans on, an unstoppable corruption that resets the world every time the devil gene flares up. Jin's crusade to provoke worldwide conflict with Mishima Zaibatsu and G Corporation isn't heroic. It's morally gray at best, a calculated chaos to rile up Azazel so he can battle at head dash on dot fighting. Azazel is brutal in every sense. The battle demands mastery, with Azazel's attacks crushing the temple and Jin barely hanging on, clad in his devil form. He shatters the demon's massive crystalline wings and eventually brings down the beast, but the aftermath isn't tidy. Azazel's death is shrouded in ambiguity. Post-fight, there's no definitive the monster is dead scene. Instead, Jin disappears, presumed missing or unconscious, and Azazel's body is left obscure. So while Jin wins the battle, the threat lingers. Here's the kicker. Azazel's defeat doesn't sever the devil gene. Devil power remains active in Jin, Kazuya, and others. That means the fight against Azazel wasn't the happily ever after cleanse of the Mishima curse fans might have hoped for. It's more like a deep cut, significant, but incomplete. This half-finished business perfectly frames Azazel as the ultimate origin of Mishima demonic corruption and Jin's bleak, catastrophic crusade. Nothing about this fight feels like a victory lap. Instead, it's the eye of a never-ending storm that Jin dared to stare down. If you thought Azazel was the peak of demonic devastation, wait till we dive into the brutal family legacy and sheer brutality of Heihachi Mishima next. Heihachi Mishima isn't just a brute patriarch, he's the beating heart of the Mishima family's brutal cycle of ambition, betrayal, and violence. Unlike his son Kazuya or grandson Jin, Heihachi doesn't carry the devil gene. But don't be fooled, he's corrupted by something just as destructive, an insatiable lust for power, and a ruthless willingness to manipulate demonic forces and family alike to keep control of Mishima Zaibatsu. Before you write him off as just another villain, hear me out. Heihachi's rise isn't just about brute strength, it's about cold calculation, strategic awakenings of entities like Ogre and Azazel, and total disregard for the fallout of playing God. He's the architect of nearly every tragedy in the Mishima saga, yet also a victim of the very cycle he helped start. His final canonical defeat in Tekken 7 perfectly mirrors the family's tragic pattern. After decades of throwing Kazuya off cliffs during their legendary battles, he finally meets his end in a volcanic showdown, where Kazuya turns the tables and casts Heihachi into molten lava. Poetic justice on full display. Heihachi dies the same way he tried to kill others, closing the bloody Mishima circle. This volcano battle battle isn't just physical, it's symbolic. The climax of bitter rivalry fueled by years of betrayal. Kazuya's demonic powers clash with Heihachi's relentless will in a fight ending with Heihachi's body consumed by lava. It's throne room level finality for the Heihachi era, but here's where it gets dark. His death doesn't stop the chaos. Mishima Zaibatsu fractures further without his iron grip. Corporate warfare and power struggles explode between Kazuya, Jin, and other factions. The family curse Heihachi, both perpetuated and embodied, continues to fuel endless conflict. What stands out is how Heihachi is both monster and martyr here. He victimizes his family, throws his blood into death pits, and awakens horrors like ogre through ambition. Yet he suffers ultimate betrayal and demise at his son's hands, a victim of the cycle he helped start. This tragic symmetry drives Tekken's core themes: generational curses, doomed legacies, and endless betrayal. Walking away from Heihachi's fall, you realize the Mishima Saga isn't about heroes or villains alone. It's about destructive patterns families trap themselves in. His volcano death is a violent punctuation on decades of tragedy, but also a new beginning, marked by instability and fresh conflicts deepening the dark drama. If you think Heihachi's demise ends the Mishima curse, wait until we dive into Angel Jin, the embodiment of Jin Kazama's battle to reconcile his demonic heritage with his Kazama lineage. Angel Jin is the ultimate evolution of Jin Kazama's tortured legacy, a final boss less about destruction and more about internal resolution. After decades wrestling with the devil gene curse inherited from the Mishima bloodline, Jin finally manages to conquer and integrate that demonic power with the pure Kazama clan energy. The result? An angelic form representing a rare moment of harmony between the two opposing forces that have torn him apart since Tekken 3. Before Angel Jin, Tekken's final bosses were usually about domination or descent into darkness. Think True Devil, Kazuya's full embrace of demonic power for conquest, or Heihachi's ruthless climb atop the Mishima Zaibatsu. Angel Jin flips that script. He's not the culmination of evil or unrestrained violence. He's a symbol of redemption and spiritual transcendence. Where True Devil Kazuya screams, "I am the devil incarnate," Angel Jin calmly declares, "I am balance." Tekken shows that after all the bloodshed, betrayal, and ancient curses, there's still a chance for hope mixed with clouded uncertainty. Introduced in Tekken 8, Angel Jin is one of the hardest final bosses in arcade mode, appearing if you land 3 or more perfect rounds, and also acts as an internal adversary within the campaign. Defeating him isn't just beating a fighter, it's overcoming Jin's own internal struggle. But here's the kicker: Angel Jin's defeat in gameplay doesn't mean a death like we saw with Heihachi or Jinpachi. Instead, it marks a thematic climax, the end of one battle within Jin's soul rather than the end of Jin himself. Think of Angel Jin like a spiritual checkpoint in the Mishima Saga. The decades of fighting have been about external wars, tournaments, volcanoes, ancient demons, while Angel Jin turns the lens inward. He's the fusion of the series' two central powers, the Devil's Rage and the Kazama's protective purity. This fusion creates a form glowing with white light and wings, moving fluidly between devastating power and graceful calm. It's almost ironic that the most evolved final boss isn't just a monster to defeat, he's assigned the Mishima feud, and supernatural curse might be transcended. Angel Jin's story contrasts sharply with True Devil Kazuya's path. Where Kazuya spirals deeper into demonic terror, Jin's angelic state hints at forgiveness and balance, even if it's fragile. Jin's mastery over the devil gene isn't about suppression, but coexistence, an uneasy truce full of questions. This ambiguity keeps Angel Jin compelling and mysterious. Is Jin truly free from the curse, or has he only tempered it? The game leaves it unclear. That uncertainty fuels fan debate over whether Angel Jin is ultimate victory or just a new phase in a never-ending struggle. From a gameplay perspective, Angel Jin offers one of the most challenging final boss fights in Tekken history. His moveset blends energy blasts with Kazama martial arts, forcing players to adapt constantly. Facing him is like battling both Jin's full potential and his internal hesitation, a boss demanding respect both narratively and mechanically. Angel Jin's story marks a hopeful new chapter for the Mishima bloodline and Tekken's supernatural war. It suggests that after all the violence, true balance might be possible, not by wiping out one side, but through integration. For the first time, the devil gene is part of Jin's identity he accepts rather than fights. Of course, that hope comes with caveats. Angel Jin's ambiguous fate means the story isn't over. The Mishima Saga is a war not easily ended, and the devil gene's shadow still looms. But Angel Jin stands as the most evolved final boss, a symbol that the endless cycle of revenge and destruction might one day give way to inner peace. It's a powerful, almost poetic way to close this long-running drama. Tekken has been breaking its own game for 30 years, from grab loops that literally literally stole your controller from you, to DLC characters so overpowered the community called them pay to win. Today, I'm breaking down the most broken characters in Tekken history and exactly what made each one a nightmare. Starting with the original sin of competitive Tekken, King. Tekken 1. Imagine landing a single grab and watching your opponent sit there, completely unable to do anything while half their health bar evaporates. That's not a hypothetical, that was King in Tekken 1, and it was every bit as miserable as it sounds. King's command grab chains had 0 escape windows once initiated. 0. You got caught, you stayed caught. There were no frames to input a throw escape during the sequence, which meant a single successful grab wasn't just good, it was a guaranteed win condition. His chain grab combinations dealt anywhere from 50 to 65% damage in one unbreakable sequence. One red, one chain, and your opponent went from full health to praying for a miracle in about 4 seconds. But here's the thing, it wasn't just the damage. King's grab range exceeded standard characters by roughly 1.5 times the normal distance, so he was snatching people from ranges where they thought they were safe. Oh, I'll just space him out. No, you won't, he's already got you. The result? King was banned from multiple arcade tournaments in 1995, straight up removed from competitive play. Early professional players like Kitamura built entire tournament careers primarily through King grab setups, which is either genius or an indictment of the game's balance. Now, some argue the bans were premature, that counterplay just needed time to develop. And honestly, there's a case for that. Nobody had lab throw escapes for hundreds of hours yet, but when your response to a character is just ban him, that tells you something. Fair or not, King was the first time competitive Tekken looked at itself and said, we have a balance problem. But if King's grab chains felt inescapable, wait until you hear what Kazuya was doing in Tekken 2. Kazuya Mishima, Tekken 2. King was strong, Kazuya Mishima was something else entirely, because Tekken 2 didn't just give one character better moves, it gave one character an entirely separate set of mechanics that nobody else on the roster was allowed to touch. Let me explain. Kazuya's Electric Wind God Fist had a frame advantage of +6 to +8 on block. Most launcher moves in Tekken 2 sat somewhere between -5 and 0. That means where every other character was taking a risk by throwing out their best move, Kazuya was getting rewarded for it. He'd swing, you'd block correctly, and he was still in your face with advantage. You did everything right, and you were still losing, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets genuinely stupid. Tekken 2 also had Devil as a separate unlockable character, essentially Kazuya, but upgraded in every way that mattered. Devil got access to unblockable projectiles like the Devil Blaster. Not hard to block. Unblockable. The game simply did not give you a defensive option. Hey, that seems unfair. Yeah, it was. And because Devil shared Kazuya's entire moveset on top of that, picking base Kazuya was already settling for second best. Once Kazuya got you airborne, juggle combos hit 60 to 70% damage with proper execution. Pair that with crouch cancel mechanics that let him interrupt your animations mid-sequence, and you had a character who controlled the pace of every single exchange from start to finish. The results spoke for themselves. Kazuya dominated competitive Tekken 2 throughout 1996 and 1997. The meta was essentially pick Kazuya or lose to Kazuya. Now here's the question nobody can answer cleanly. Was Namco deliberately making the protagonist overpowered to match his story importance? Or was this pure oversight? One means they broke the game on purpose, the other means they broke it by accident and didn't notice for a year. Pick your poison, but at least Kazuya was a real character with real execution demands. The next entry on this list didn't even bother with that courtesy. OG Ari, Tekken 3. Let's talk about the closest thing Tekken has ever produced to a genuine infinite combo. And no, I'm not exaggerating. Ogre, the sub-boss of Tekken 3, had a stance transition loop that, once initiated, had no practical escape window. You just sat there, watching your health bar evaporate in a sequence that could theoretically continue until you were dead, then continue some more out of spite. Here's the thing about boss characters in fighting games. They're supposed to be hard. They're supposed to feel unfair when the CPU is controlling them. But Ogre wasn't just unfair against the CPU. He was unfair against humans. His primary combo starters sat at -3 or better on block, which in Tekken terms means that even when you successfully defended against his attacks, he was still at advantage. You blocked correctly and got punished for it, which is, not ideal. On top of that, he had multiple unblockable move sequences from a standing position, not from a special stance, not from a specific setup, just standing there, breathing, being Ogre. These forced guaranteed chip damage with zero defensive counterplay. Your options were get hit or get hit slightly differently, but the real gut punch is how this played out in practice. Ogre's toolkit was so stacked that competitive players quickly realized he warped every matchup he touched. You weren't playing Tekken against Ogre. You were playing a different, worse game where the fundamental rules of blocking and punishing simply didn't apply the way they were supposed to. Entire strategies had to be built around just surviving his pressure, not actually winning neutral. Ogre was the moment Tekken learned a lesson it would need to keep relearning for the next 2 decades. Boss characters and competitive balance are fundamentally incompatible. You can make a character feel powerful, or you can make a character feel fair. Ogre chose violence. But if you think an infinite combo is the most absurd balance problem Tekken 3 produced, wait until you hear about the tiny dinosaur that broke the entire game by simply being too short to hit. Gon, Tekken 3. Let me tell you about the time a tiny dinosaur from a manga broke casual Tekken so hard that nobody wanted to play against him. And I mean nobody. Gon was a guest character in the console version of Tekken 3, licensed from a Japanese manga series about a small orange dinosaur who doesn't speak and just kind of headbutts things. Adorable, wholesome, absolutely devastating in practice. His character model was roughly 15% smaller than every other fighter in the game, which doesn't sound like much until you realize what that actually means. Most attacks in Tekken are designed to connect with characters of a standard height. Gon was not standard height, he was barely knee height, so moves that should land cleanly on any normal fighter just sailed right over his head like he wasn't even there. Mids whiff, highs were a fantasy. You'd throw a perfectly timed punish and watch it fly over this little orange menace like a breeze through a parking garage. But here's the kicker. Gon could hit you back just fine. His tail attacks had deceptive range and hit multiple times per animation, creating this absurd situation where a dinosaur the size of a fire hydrant was outranging characters twice his size. And if he launched you, guaranteed juggle sequences dealt massive chunks of your health bar. Half your life gone to a creature that canonically eats bugs. Now here's where it gets interesting. Gon was never in the arcade version of Tekken 3 at all. He was a PlayStation exclusive, which meant the competitive scene, built almost entirely around arcade cabinets, never had to deal with him officially, but at home, absolute menace. Couch sessions turned into hostage situations the moment someone picked the tiny dinosaur. The community still argues about whether he was genuinely broken or just obnoxious to fight. His hitbox advantage made him functionally unbalanceable against most of the roster, and his guest character licensing meant he was never coming back for future games either. A one-and-done nightmare. A dinosaur too powerful for your living room and too legally complicated to ever return. I don't know what to tell you, but if a tiny dinosaur caused problems by being too small to hit, wait until you see what Jin Kazama did to Tekken 4 by being too everything. Jin Kazama, Tekken 4. Every fighting game has one rule that sits above everything else. You block, you survive. That's the deal. That's been the deal since Street Fighter 2. You eat a mix-up, you take damage. You read the mix-up and block correctly, you get to breathe. It's the social contract of the entire genre. Jin Kazama in Tekken 4 looked at that contract and set it on fire. His perfect block counter stance had 0 startup frames. 0. That means the instant you blocked one of Jin's attacks, he could immediately transition into a counter stance that guaranteed 40 to 50 damage on you for successfully defending. You blocked his move, you made the correct read, you did everything right, and you got punished harder than if you just stood there eating the hit like a mannequin. Let me say that again because it sounds fake. Blocking Jin was actively worse than not blocking Jin. That's not a balance issue. That's a philosophical crisis. But here's where it gets truly stupid. If Jin did manage to land a hit, which was comically easy given that defending against him was a death sentence, his dash cancel combos turned a single opening into a full-blown execution. Juggle sequences lasting 8 to 10 seconds, dealing over 70% of your health bar. One mistake, one stray hit, and you're watching your character bounce around like a volleyball for what feels like an eternity. Round over, thanks for playing. Hey, you should try blocking next time. time. No, you should not. And the competitive scene reflected exactly how broken this was. Between 2001 and 2003, Jin appeared in 35 to 40% of top 8 lineups at major tournaments. For 2 full years, Tekken 4 was essentially Jin Kazama, the game, featuring some other characters who were also technically present. Oh, and there was also an actual infinite stance transition loop that let Jin cycle through guaranteed damage with no escape. You'd think something like that would get patched immediately. It wasn't addressed until patch 4.3 in 2003. That's roughly 2 years of a literal infinite combo existing in competitive play. Namco either couldn't fix their protagonist or didn't want to. Neither answer is reassuring. Jin in Tekken 4 isn't just one of the most broken characters in Tekken history. He's one of the most broken characters in fighting game history, period. He didn't just warp the meta, he broke the fundamental logic that every fighting game is built on. But if Jin made defense useless, wait until you hear about the Tekken 5 character who turned offense into a zero-risk slot machine. Steve Fox, Tekken 5. In most fighting games, blocking is your safety net. You block an attack, you're at a slight disadvantage or maybe neutral, and then the game resets to footsies. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Steve Fox in Tekken 5 looked at that entire system and laughed. His basic 4-hit combo string was plus 12 on block. Let me put that number in context for you. Standard moves in Tekken sit somewhere between -5 and plus 2 on block. That's the range the entire game is balanced around. Plus 12 means that if you successfully block Steve's string, if you did the correct defensive thing, you were now eating a guaranteed follow-up attack. Blocking was worse than getting hit. The fundamental contract of every fighting game ever made, the idea that defense keeps you safe, simply did not apply to this man. But here's where it gets worse. Steve also had peekaboo stance, which auto-parried incoming strikes. So not only did his offense punish you for blocking correctly, his defense also punished you for attacking correctly. There was no right answer. You block, you lose frames. You attack, you get parried. You stand there and do nothing, he hits you anyway. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. The tournament results were exactly what you'd expect. Steve dominated 38 to 45% of top 16 placements at major events throughout 2005 and 2006. Nearly half the competitive field was one character. And the Steve mirror matches, Steve versus Steve, became legendary for all the wrong reasons. These games devolved into 20+ minute slogs of repetitive, unblockable pressure loops, where both players just took turns running the same sequences. It was like watching 2 broken washing machines slam into each other on spin cycle. But the most fascinating part of Steve's reign wasn't the frame data or the tournament numbers. It was the geographical schism. Japanese competitors looked at Steve and saw technical depth. They saw a character that rewarded mastery, that had layers of complexity worth exploring. Western players looked at the exact same data, the exact same tournament results, and saw a fundamentally unfair character that needed to be banned from competition entirely. 2 competitive cultures, same evidence, opposite conclusions. The Japanese scene celebrated him. The Western scene wanted him gone. Neither side was wrong exactly. Steve genuinely did require execution to maximize. He also genuinely broke the risk-reward system the entire game was built on. Both things were true simultaneously. I don't know what to tell you, but if Steve's frame advantage on block sounds absurd, wait until you hear about Brian Fury, whose taunt became the most disrespectful competitive tool in Tekken history. Brian Fury, Tekken 5.0. In most fighting games, a taunt is a flex. It's the thing you do when you've already won the round and you want to rub it in. It's designed to be punishable. You taunt, you eat a launcher to the face, you deserve it. That's the social contract. Brian Fury in Tekken 5.0 looked at that social contract, ripped it in half, and used the pieces to start a combo. Here's the thing. A standard taunt in Tekken sits at around -15 to -20 on block. That's enormous. That's please hit me in the face, I'm begging you levels of vulnerability. Brian's taunt in the 5.0 arcade update, -1. One single frame of disadvantage. That's basically neutral. That's basically nothing. You could sneeze and miss your punish window. And if that was the whole story, it'd be funny but manageable. A safe taunt is weird. A safe taunt that feeds directly into frame trap setups guaranteeing 60+ damage? That's a war crime. Brian players discovered that the taunt could be cancelled into stance transitions, which reset his frame advantage entirely. So the loop went something like this. Taunt, cancel into stance, pressure into frame trap, opponent opponent blocks. Taunt again. Rinse and repeat until your opponent either guesses wrong or throws their controller through a wall. The taunt cancel system created infinite pressure resets. Brian could literally loop taunts into guaranteed unblockable sequences with zero risk, because the move that was supposed to be his most vulnerable animation was safer than half his actual attacks. Hey Brian, why are you taunting mid-round? Oh, I'm not taunting. I'm killing you. Common mistake. Tournament results told the whole story. By 2006, Brian was showing up in 25 to 30% of top 8 placements at major events. Players started openly questioning whether Namco had deliberately overbuffed him for marketing reasons, pushing the cybernetic psychopath as a competitively favored character because he looked cool on promotional material, which is, not the most reassuring explanation for why a taunt became a death sentence. The beauty of Brian's brokenness is that it wasn't baked into his original design like Steve's boxing stance Nightmare. This was a buff. Someone at Namco looked at Brian's taunt, decided -15 was too harsh, and landed on -1. Somebody made that decision on purpose. I don't know what to tell you, but if you think a weaponized taunt is absurd, wait until Tekken 6 introduced a character whose entire design philosophy seemed to be, what if we just made someone good at everything? Tekken 6. Every game in this series had a broken character. That's basically tradition at this point, but each one was slightly more broken than the last. Like, Tekken's developers were running an internal competition to see how far they could push it. Bob is where they won that competition. Introduced in Tekken 6, Bob looked like a joke. A morbidly obese martial artist who moved like he weighed 140 pounds. Funny concept. Less funny when you realized he was the single most dominant character Tekken competitive play had ever seen. Here's the thing. Bob's entire game plan revolved around his peekaboo stance, and this stance was fundamentally unbalanceable by design. It had a 5-frame startup. 5 frames. That's faster than most jabs in the game, and on entry, it granted armor properties with throw and vulnerability baked in, so you couldn't strike him out of it, you couldn't grab him out of it, and once he was in it, he had access to combos dealing 40% or more of your health bar from a single entry. Okay, so just block and punish when he comes out of stance, right? Great idea, except his round kick from peekaboo was -1 on block. -1. That's not a punishment window. That's a rounding error. He could literally spam this move with zero meaningful consequence. But here's where it gets genuinely stupid. Bob's stance resets created infinite pressure sequences. He'd enter peekaboo, throw the safe kick, reset back into peekaboo, and do it again and again. With proper execution, these loops could continue for 15 seconds or more, and opponents had no reliable escape option. Your defensive strategy was hope. The numbers tell the rest of the story. By 2008, Bob occupied over 40% of major tournament top 8 placements. 4 out of every 10 finalists at any given major were playing the same character. That's not dominance. That's a hostage situation. The real controversy wasn't that Bob was overtuned. Overtuned implies you can dial it back. Bob's problem was architectural. A safe launcher that also provides armor isn't a balance issue you fix with number tweaks. That's a character whose core design philosophy conflicts with the game functioning properly. You'd have to rebuild him from scratch, which is basically admitting you shipped a character that should never have existed in that form. Bob was power creep given a body and a fighting stance. Every broken character before him was a warning sign, and nobody at Namco read a single one. But if you think a dominant stance character is bad, wait until Tekken 7 imported an entire fighting game's worth of mechanics onto a single guest character. Akuma, Tekken 7. Every character on this list broke the game they were in. Akuma broke the rules of the game he was in. There's a difference. When Bandai Namco invited Akuma over from Street Fighter as a guest character in Tekken 7, they didn't just port his model. They brought his entire mechanical identity. V-trigger, Raging Demon, meter management, all of it. They essentially copy-pasted a Street Fighter character into a 3D fighting game and said, yeah, this should be fine. It was not fine. V-trigger gave Akuma a flat 15% damage multiplier and access to unblockable follow-ups. In Street Fighter, this is balanced by defensive systems designed to handle exactly this kind of pressure. Parries, reversals, specific counterplay options. Tekken has none of those systems. Zero. Tekken's defensive framework was built for Tekken characters, and Akuma was a foreign organism operating under foreign laws inside a host body with no immune response. Then there's Raging Demon. Akuma could chain at mid-combo for guaranteed damage exceeding 50% of your health bar. Situations that would normally be survivable became kill confirms. You'd eat a launcher thinking, okay, I'll survive this, and then a demon just eats your entire soul. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. His mix-up game was arguably worse. True 50-50s that guaranteed damage on every defensive option except one specific movement. You block low, you get hit. You block high, you get hit. You sidestep wrong, you get hit. Your only escape was knowing the one correct option and executing it perfectly every time. Meanwhile, Akuma's player just had to guess once correctly. Frame advantage on his key strings sat between +3 and +6. Most Tekken characters consider +1 on block a good day. Akuma was operating with advantages that let him pressure continuously, while standard roster characters had to respect turn-taking fundamentals he simply didn't acknowledge. Tournament results told the full story. Within 6 months of his arcade release, Akuma represented 20 to 25% of top 8 finishes. One character out of a roster of dozens showing up in a quarter of all Grand Finals brackets. He wasn't just strong, he was playing a different game inside your game and winning because your game had no answer. And that's the real problem with Akuma. He wasn't overpowered in the traditional sense. He was a Street Fighter character whose entire mechanical framework violated assumptions every other character was balanced around. You can't nerf that. You'd have to remove what makes him Akuma. But if you think a guest character from another franchise was bad, wait until Tekken 7 produced a homegrown monster that was somehow even worse. Leroy Smith. Tekken 7 launch. Let's talk about the moment Tekken stopped being a fighting game controversy and became a consumer rights debate, because Leroy Smith didn't just break the meta. He broke trust. Leroy dropped his DLC in December 2019, right in the middle of Tekken 7's competitive golden age. The game was at peak visibility, peak tournament attendance, peak everything. Here's the thing. Leroy's design wasn't just strong, it was philosophically wrong for the game he existed in. His cane weapon extended his attack range 15 to 20% beyond standard Tekken characters. In a franchise built entirely around close-range combat, spacing, and frame traps at point-blank distance, they essentially created a zoner. That's like adding a stock car to a horse race and going, what? It still has legs. 4 of them, technically, but the range was only the appetizer. His unblockable stance follow-ups guaranteed 60% or more damage once he got rolling. 60% from a stance that you can't block. Players who had spent a decade learning how to defend in Tekken suddenly discovered that defense didn't matter against one specific character you had to pay extra for. Cool. And his main launcher, the move you're supposed to punish when you successfully block it, was +5 on block. Let me explain what that means in plain terms. You block the move correctly, you defend perfectly, and you are now at a disadvantage. The game punishes you for playing good defense, which is, not ideal. The results were immediate and catastrophic. Within 4 weeks of his release, Leroy appeared in 30 to 35% of tournament lineups. 4 weeks. That's not organic meta development, that's an invasion. Players who had spent years mastering legacy characters watched DLC buyers walk into brackets with a character whose mechanics simply weren't available to the base roster. His unblockable setups, his cane range, his plus-on-block launchers. None of it existed for anyone who didn't open their wallet. Professional players started calling him pay-to-win openly, and honestly, it was hard to argue with them. You literally had to purchase access to the strongest character in the game. No grinding, no unlocking through play. Swipe card, receive competitive advantage. This was the first major monetization controversy in competitive Tekken history, and the conversation shifted overnight from is this character balanced to is this business model ethical. Tournament organizers debated restrictions, community forums erupted, the competitive scene fractured along a fault line nobody saw coming, because nobody expected the biggest threat to Tekken's integrity to come from Tekken's own publisher. And if you think Namco learned their lesson from the Leroy backlash, allow me to introduce you to the character they released right alongside him, Fai Q Mraya M, Tekken 7 launch. If Leroy Smith was the crime, Fakamram was the getaway car. Released just a few months later in March 2020, this Muay Thai giant didn't just have balance problems. He had balance problems that looked suspiciously identical to the other DLC character Namco had just released before him. Almost like someone at headquarters had a quarterly sales target to hit. But let's talk about what actually made Fakamram terrifying to fight, because the mechanical breakdown here is genuinely absurd. His stance had unblockable follow-ups with 0 visual telegraph, not hard to see, not requires fast reactions, 0. The animation gave you literally nothing to read. You're standing there, he enters enters his crouch stance, and now you have to guess. Not react, guess. In a game built entirely around reading your opponent's animations and responding accordingly, Fakumram just deleted that entire system. You couldn't defend because there was no information to defend with. It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, except your opponent's hand is behind their back and they've already thrown. His safe jump attacks had 5-frame startups and reset to neutral on block, meaning even when you successfully defended, you gained nothing. No punish, no frame advantage, no reward whatsoever for making the correct read. You just went back to square one while Fakumram got to try again and again and again. His grab range extended approximately 1.5 times beyond standard Tekken grabs, so even spacing correctly didn't save you. He was grabbing people from distances that would make King raise an eyebrow. Within 3 months, Fakumram occupied 25 to 30% of top 8 placements at major tournaments. Combined with Leroy's 30 to 35%, that's 2 DLC characters accounting for over half the competitors in grand finals. 2 characters you had to pay extra for, which is, not ideal. Here's where this stops being a balanced discussion and starts being a business ethics discussion. 1 overpowered DLC character is a mistake. 2 overpowered DLC characters released back-to-back is a pattern. The competitive community did the math and arrived at the only logical conclusion. Namco designed these characters stronger on purpose to drive purchases. Whether that's actually true doesn't even matter anymore. The perception became reality. Trust in Tekken, 7's competitive integrity took permanent damage. Professional players openly called the game pay to win. Tournament organizers questioned whether DLC characters should be allowed at all. Years of carefully built competitive credibility got torched because somebody wanted to sell season passes. Fakumram alone would have been a problem. Fakumram alongside Leroy was a conspiracy theory that wrote itself. But if you think the DLC controversy was the lowest point for Tekken's competitive balance, Tekken 8 decided to prove that launch rosters can be just as catastrophic. Jun Kazama, Tekken 8 launch. Nearly 30 years after King first terrorized players with chain grabs nobody could escape, Tekken 8 launched with a character who proved the franchise learned absolutely nothing. Jun Kazama, returning after years of being essentially missing from the series, arrived in January 2024 with a kit so overloaded it felt like Namco handed her the cheat codes and told everyone else to deal with it. Let's start with the heat system. Jun's heat activation granted her temporary unblockable properties alongside a 20% damage multiplier. 2 mechanics. 0 other characters in Tekken 8 had access to either one. She was playing a different game than the rest of the roster, which is, not ideal when you're trying to run a competitive fighting game. But the heat system wasn't even the real problem. Her main launcher sat at -1 on block. Standard expectation for a launcher in Tekken is -5 at minimum. That's the number that gives your opponent a window to actually punish you. Jun's launcher didn't have that. She could throw out launching attacks with functionally 0 risk and guaranteed reward. The entire concept of defense just stopped applying. Then you get to the wall. Jun's wall combos dealt 70% or more damage from mid-screen. Most characters need to work you into the corner over multiple exchanges to get that kind of output. Jun just needed 1 clean hit and a vague awareness of where the wall was. Her stance transitions reset frame advantage automatically, generating infinite pressure loops with no escape point. You blocked correctly? Cool. She's already in another stance. You blocked that too? Great. Here comes the next one. The tournament results told the story immediately. Jun appeared in 28 to 35% of top 8 placements during Tekken 8's first competitive season. That's launch meta dominance on a scale the series hadn't seen since, well, you already know who. Jin Kazama, Tekken 4, over 2 decades earlier. And that parallel is the thing nobody could ignore. A beloved protagonist returns after a long absence. They receive mechanics no other character can access. They dominate the competitive scene from day one. The community immediately suspects the developer overtuned their flagship character for marketing purposes. It happened with Jin in 2001. It happened with Jun in 2024. Same company, same pattern, 23 years apart. Here's the thing though, the meta is still evolving. Patches are still rolling out. Jun's legacy in Tekken 8 is genuinely still being written, and maybe 6 months from now, she'll be perfectly balanced, and this section will feel like an overreaction. But that's what they said about Jin 2, and Steve, and Leroy, and every single character in this video, because that's the real pattern. Every era of Tekken has produced a character that broke the rules. Every era the community has had the exact same argument about whether it was intentional design or accidental oversight, whether it was narrative favoritism or mechanical negligence. That argument never gets resolved. It just resets with the next game and the next broken character. King in 1995, Kazuya Kazuya in 1996, Jin in 2001, Steve in 2005, Bob in 2008, Leroy in 2019, Jun in 2024. The names change, the mechanics change, but the cycle never breaks. That argument is Tekken's real infinite combo, and nobody's found the escape input yet. Every fighting game has a character that makes you want to unplug the controller. Not yours, your opponent's. Tekken has about a dozen of them, and the hatred for some of these fighters has outlasted entire console generations. So today, we're breaking down the most despised characters in Tekken history, and exactly why the community wants them deleted from existence. Starting with the one who invented the concept of cheap, there's a term in fighting games that every single player knows: Eddie player. It means someone who wins through pure gimmicks instead of actual skill. And the reason that term exists is because of one capoeira dancer and his stupid cartwheel kick. Eddie Gordo debuted in Tekken 3 back in 1997, and he immediately became the most feared character in the game. Not because he was cool, not because he had deep mechanics, because you could mash 2 buttons and watch him flail around like a breakdancer having a seizure. And it actually worked. His moveset was designed so that random inputs from his handstand and relaxed stances chained into each other endlessly. Zero skill required. New players picking up Eddie could beat people who'd been playing Tekken for years. That's not a slight advantage. That's a character warping the entire experience for everyone around him. Just Pick Eddie became the universal advice for anyone who wanted easy wins without learning the game. His evasive animations and low-hitting strings were genuinely difficult to read for anyone who hadn't specifically labbed the matchup. You couldn't punish what you couldn't track. You just had to sit there and eat cartwheels while you questioned every life decision that led you to this moment. Now here's where the debate gets spicy. Eddie was never considered top tier at high-level play, but the gap between what he demanded from the user and what he demanded from the opponent was absurd. The developers basically gave a flamethrower to a toddler and told everyone else to just dodge. But the real legacy isn't the character, it's the language. Eddie player became permanent fighting game slang that outlived his dominance by decades. A capoeira dancer doing cartwheels became the most feared fighter in casual Tekken, and the community has never forgiven him for it. But if Eddie taught the world what cheap looks like, the next character taught them what annoying feels like on a molecular level. Ling Xiaoyu. Eddie was annoying because of what he could do with one move. Ling Xiaoyu was annoying because of what she could do with everything. Her entire design philosophy was built around making your life miserable, and she was extraordinarily good at her job. She debuted in Tekken 3 alongside Eddie, but where Eddie had one broken trick, Xiaoyu had an entire broken ecosystem. Her Arts of Inashi stance system gave her unreactable mix-ups that flowed into each other like water. Dance cancels let her reset pressure infinitely, meaning she could keep attacking, back out, and start attacking again before you even finished your punish animation. Her taunt cancels recovered faster than your retaliation could connect. And because she was physically smaller than most of the roster, standard counter hit strategies just whiffed over her head, which is, not ideal. But here's the thing that made Ling truly despised. It wasn't just that she was strong, it was the knowledge gap. A Ling player could sit down, learn her mix-up flowcharts in roughly 20 hours, and have a tournament-viable character. You, the person fighting her, needed over 100 hours of character-specific lab work just to know what was happening. General Tekken fundamentals meant nothing. Spacing meant nothing. Everything you knew about the game had to be thrown out the window and replaced with a Ling-specific survival guide. She wasn't a character. She was homework, and she stayed homework for years. Tekken 3, top tier. Tekken 4, top tier. Tekken 5, still there. Tekken 6, still making people close the application. A multi-generational reign of terror built entirely on the fact that fighting her required you to study her more than you studied the actual game. Nobody picks up a fighting game thinking, I can't wait to spend 100 hours in training mode learning how to not lose to one specific character. But that's exactly what Ling demanded, every single time. And if you thought asymmetric knowledge requirements were frustrating, wait until you meet the character who turned every match into an endless kickboxing lecture you never signed up for. Some characters are hated because they're overpowered. Some are hated because they're annoying. Hwoarang is both, simultaneously, all the time, and has been for 27 years. which is, not ideal. He debuted in Tekken 3 back in 1997 with a left and right foot stance switching system that sounds cool on paper and plays like a nightmare in practice. The idea was simple: switch between stances to chain together kick strings. The reality was that those stance transitions allowed Hwoarang to throw out relentless pressure strings that were extremely difficult to interrupt without solid knowledge of when to duck or sidestep. You weren't playing Tekken anymore. You were watching Tekken happen to you. And here's where it gets really ugly. That pressure game in the Tekken 3 and 4 era wasn't just strong. It was so suffocating that players who didn't know the matchup had virtually zero chance of getting a turn back. If you didn't understand which strings had gaps and which ones you had to respect, you were essentially bringing a pool noodle to a sword fight. The meta didn't just favor Hwoarang, it punished anyone who hadn't done their homework against him. But surely they fixed that, right? Turns out, not really. Across multiple Tekken entries, Hwoarang has consistently remained one of the most popular and complained about characters in online ranked play. Every new installment, the community braces for whatever fresh hell his flamingo stance is going to bring. That's not a balance oversight. That's a permanent resident. The man has been tilting people longer than some of his players have been alive, and then there's the personality. Because Hwoarang isn't just frustrating to fight, he's cocky about it. His arrogant taekwondo hotshot persona feels like it was specifically engineered to tilt you before the round even starts. Casual players have been known to just forfeit at the character select screen, not because they can't win, but because they don't want to deal with 90 seconds of relentless kick pressure from a guy who looks like he'd cut in line at a coffee shop and then wink at you about it. He's the full package of frustration, mechanically oppressive and narratively insufferable. 27 years and counting. But if you think stance switching kicks are bad, wait until you meet the guy who just picks you up and breaks your spine instead. Let me paint you a picture. You walk up to a Tekken 4 arcade cabinet in 2001. You've got your quarters ready, you've been practicing your combos, you feel good about yourself. Your opponent picks Craig Marduk, you now have roughly a 1 in 4 chance of winning that match. That's not a fighting game, that's a slot machine with extra steps. Marduk arrived in Tekken 4 with a bear hug command grab that dealt 150 damage on a single input. For context, that's enough to delete most of a health bar in one move, one grab, and it didn't just deal damage and reset to neutral like a normal throw, it launched into full combo follow-ups, meaning the 150 was the starting point, the floor, not the ceiling. But here's where it gets genuinely stupid. His grab range exceeded other grapplers in the roster by roughly 1.5 character lengths. So the normal strategy against a grappler, which is stay out of grab range and poke them to death, just didn't work. You'd be standing at what you thought was a safe distance, feeling confident, and then suddenly a 300-pound Veil Tudo fighter is hugging you like a long-lost relative at a family reunion. Except the hug does 150 damage, and your character is now airborne. Casual player win rates against Marduk were sitting at 20 to 30% during early arcade testing, meaning he was winning 70 to 80% of casual matches before any balance adjustments even landed. That's not a character. That's an extinction event for quarters. And here's the part that really matters. Marduk didn't just break the meta, he broke the entire throw system so fundamentally that the developers had to completely redesign how grabs worked for Tekken 5 onward. He literally forced Bandai Namco to rebuild a core game mechanic from scratch. Most characters get nerfed. Marduk got an entire franchise's DNA rewritten because of him. That's not balance failure. That's a character so catastrophically overpowered, he changed the trajectory of one of the biggest fighting game series in history, which is, not ideal. But if Marduk broke Tekken's throw system, the next character on this list broke something arguably worse: the entire concept of defense. Every character on this list is hated for doing something unfair. Steve Fox is hated for doing something worse. He made Tekken boring. Steve debuted in Tekken 4 as a British boxer, which already tells you everything about his design philosophy. No kicks, no flashy spinning nonsense, just hands, and a sway stance that broke the entire game's neutral in half. Here's how it worked. His sway, performed with D+1, let him completely evade mid-level attacks, not reduce their damage, not trade with them, evade them entirely like they didn't exist, and mids make up roughly 60 to 70% of most characters' poke patterns. So if you pick Steve, the majority of your opponent's game plan just stopped working. They'd throw out their best pokes, the ones that work against literally everyone else. And Steve would just lean back like he was dodging a conversation at a party. But it got worse. Tekken 5 rolled around in 2004, and players discovered infinite punch loops using chainable jab combos with 0 recovery windows. You'd get hit once, and then you'd just keep getting hit. No gap, no escape, just punches until your health bar gave up and went home. Steve players could sway through your offense, land a single counter hit, and convert it into a full combo that felt like watching someone fill out a spreadsheet. Technically impressive, spiritually devastating, and that's exactly why people hated him. Steve wasn't cheap in the way Eddie was cheap. He didn't make you angry, he made you tired. Matches against Steve devolved into the most extreme camping you've ever seen. Sway dodge for 90 seconds, wait for a counter hit opportunity, convert into full combo, repeat. Tournament spectators literally groaned during Steve mirror matches. Streamers would lose viewers in real time. He ranked in the top 3 most banned characters alongside Ling and Eddie during the entire Tekken 5 through 6 competitive era, which is impressive when you consider those two were already considered war crimes. He didn't just beat you, he made you sit there and watch yourself lose in slow motion while questioning whether Tekken was even fun anymore. That's a special kind of hatred. Not the loud, frustrated kind, the quiet, soul-crushing kind where you put the controller down and go outside. But if Steve made the game unwatchable through patience, the next character on this list made it unplayable through pure mix-up chaos. Most characters on this list are hated for one reason. They're overpowered, they're annoying, they broke the meta. Kunimitsu 2 managed to be hated for 2 completely different reasons at the same time, which is honestly impressive in the worst possible way. Let's start with the identity crisis. The original Kunimitsu had a devoted fan base. She was a unique fighter with genuine legacy in the series, and players had been requesting her return for years. So when Tekken 7's Season 4 DLC dropped in 2020, and Bandai Namco's answer was here's a completely different character with the same name, those fans didn't exactly throw a parade. It felt less like a tribute and more like a replacement notice. We heard you love this character, so we deleted her and made a new one. You're welcome. But here's the thing, if Kunimitsu 2 had been a balanced, respectful successor, the legacy crowd would have grumbled and moved on. Instead, she launched with a toolkit so oppressive that even players who'd never heard of the original wanted her gone. Her close-range mix-ups were frame data unreactable. We're talking less than 10 frames of difference between her options, which meant defense wasn't a skill anymore. It was a coin flip. You weren't reading your opponent, you were guessing, and guessing wrong meant eating a full combo that hit 15 to 20% harder than comparable characters could manage with similar setups. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. And if she caught you in the corner, forget it. Her unblockable sword setups allowed infinite pressure resets that could convert a single knockdown into 80% of your health bar evaporating. One mistake near the wall and the round was functionally over. You just had to sit there and watch it happen, like a man watching his house burn down while holding an empty garden hose. The real kicker is that she stayed dominant. Despite patch after patch and season after season of community complaints, she maintained top-tier status through the remainder of Tekken 7's lifespan with 0 major nerfs that actually solved the problem. Players documented the frame data, posted the clips, wrote the forum essays, and nothing meaningfully changed. I don't know what to tell you. So you had one half of the community furious about a beloved character being erased, and the other half furious about unreactable mix-ups deleting their health bars. She's the only fighter on this list where the hatred was a genuine two-front war, identity and mechanics, happening simultaneously. But if you think replacing one character caused drama, wait until you meet the android who replaced Tekken's entire design philosophy. Every character we've talked about so far had one thing in common. They were fighters, martial artists. People who punched and kicked other people using real, recognizable combat disciplines. Then, Tekken 6, Bloodline Rebellion dropped in 2008 and introduced a pink-haired android who rips off her own head and attacks you with chainsaws, which is, you know, a departure. Elisa Boscanovich isn't just a hated character, she's patient zero, the exact moment Tekken stopped being a martial arts game and started being whatever it is now, and the community has never recovered from it. Here's the thing, on paper, she sounds like a joke. Detachable rocket fists, wing-powered flight, a chainsaw that sprouts from her arms like she wandered in from a completely different franchise. But her kit wasn't just weird for the sake of weird. It was genuinely oppressive in practice. Her chainsaw stance transitions created mix-up situations that were borderline unreactable at human speeds. You weren't making a read at that point. You were guessing. And if you guessed wrong, her wall carry and wall pressure could delete half your health bar before you got a chance to. That's not a gimmick, that's a problem. Okay, but surely they nerfed her. They did. Multiple times. Across Tekken 6's lifespan, and then again in Tekken 7. Didn't matter. Dedicated Alisa players kept showing up in top 32 tournament brackets anyway, proving that underneath all the anime nonsense, the gimmicks had genuine competitive teeth. The chainsaws weren't decoration. They were a fully functional pressure system wrapped in a design that made purists want to throw their arcade sticks into the ocean. But here's where it gets complicated. Alisa wasn't an accident. She was a business strategy. Bandai Namco saw the numbers. Gimmick characters sell, casual players gravitate toward flashy, unique movesets over another karate guy and a white guy. And the moment Alisa proved that anime-inspired design moved units without killing competitive viability, the floodgates opened. Every single controversial character addition after her, everyone, traces its DNA back to this pink-haired android and her detachable limbs. The purist community called it a betrayal. The casual community called it evolution. Neither side budged. That schism started in 2008, and it's still defining Tekken community politics in 2024, over 15 years later. Forums, Discord servers, tier list arguments, they all eventually circle back to the same fundamental question Alisa forced everyone to ask. Is Tekken a martial arts game, or isn't it? The answer, apparently, is not anymore. And if you think Alisa pushed that boundary, wait until you meet the character who obliterated it entirely. Lucky Chloe should not work. A bubbly pop idol cosplayer who fights by dancing, added to a franchise built on martial arts authenticity. Everything about her screams joke character, the kind of pick you choose to disrespect your opponent. Here's the thing though, she wasn't a joke, she was a trap. When Tekken 7 launched in arcades in 2015, most players took one look at the cat ears and the choreographed dance moves and immediately wrote her off, which is exactly what made her dangerous. Her Cali roll mix-ups and dance stance transitions created pressure that most players simply didn't know how to deal with, feeding directly into combos that could chunk massive damage with minimal execution risk. You didn't need years of Tekken fundamentals to make Lucky Chloe work. You needed about 45 minutes in practice mode and a willingness to look absolutely ridiculous while deleting someone's health bar. And the results showed. Players who dismissed her as a meme pick were getting bodied online at an embarrassing rate because nobody bothered to lab the matchup. The perception said, free win. The reality said, you're about to get destroyed by a teenager doing jazz hands because you refuse to learn the matchup out of principle. Which is, you know, not ideal for your ego. But the wildest part of Lucky Chloe's story isn't her damage output. It's the backlash. When she was revealed, Western fans lost their minds. The negative reaction was so loud that Tekken producer Katsuhiro Harada fired back on Twitter, sarcastically suggesting he'd replace her with a muscular skinhead character for the Western release. A senior developer publicly trolling his own fan base because the outrage over a dancing cat girl was that disproportionate. Japanese audiences, meanwhile, were largely fine with her. She fit comfortably within the pop idol aesthetic that's been a staple of Japanese gaming for decades. The controversy stopped being about balance entirely. It became about what Tekken was allowed to be as a franchise. Was she a fun addition that gave the roster personality? Or was she a shallow, pandering design bolted onto a fighting game that never asked for it? Western communities landed on the second interpretation. Japanese audiences shrugged and picked her without a second thought. Nobody ever settled that argument. They just kept losing to her while having it. Every tournament set featuring Lucky Chloe became a miniature culture war, with commentators dancing around the design controversy while her player danced on their opponent's health bar. The character who was supposed to be a joke had the last laugh. But if you think a dancing cheerleader caused problems, wait until you hear about the character who broke Tekken 7 so badly that tournaments banned him within 2 weeks of release. Every fighting game has balance issues. That's just the nature of the genre. You release 50 characters with thousands of moves each, and something's going to slip through the cracks. That's expected. That's forgivable. What happened with Leroy Smith was neither of those things. Leroy dropped as Tekken 7 Season 3 DLC in December 2019, and within hours, the community knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. His DB+2 was a power crush armor move, meaning he could absorb your attack mid-animation and counter-launch you into a full combo. Let me put that in perspective. You read your opponent correctly, you threw the right move at the right time, and you got punished for it. The person who made the mistake got rewarded. The person who played correctly got launched into the air and lost 60% of their health bar, which is, not ideal. But it wasn't just one move. Leroy had 0 bad matchups. Not few bad matchups, 0 professional players, people who dedicate their entire lives to understanding frame data and character interactions, looked at his toolkit and collectively said, there is no answer to this. Nobody counterpicked him because there was nothing to counterpick with. Every character in the roster lost to him. Every single one. Here's where it gets really damning. EVO Japan 2020 rolled around barely a month after Leroy's release, and the top 8 bracket featured 7 Leroy players out of 8. 7. In a game with nearly 50 characters on the roster, one of them occupied almost every single final slot. That's not a balance issue. That's a hostage situation. And Bandai Namco's response? They let it ride. Leroy dominated online ranked and offline tournaments alike for weeks before any meaningful adjustments arrived. The initial patch that did come barely touched him, and it took multiple rounds of nerfs before he resembled anything close to fair. Meanwhile, anyone who bought the DLC had a blatant competitive advantage over anyone who didn't. Hey, give us $5 and you get the best character in the game by a mile. That's not a fighting game. That's a mobile gacha scam wearing a headband. The community's reaction went beyond frustration. Leroy crystallized something players had been suspecting for a while, that Bandai Namco was deliberately shipping overpowered DLC characters to drive purchases. Release them broken, collect the revenue, then patch them down and act like you were monitoring the data. The pay-to-win accusation went mainstream, and honestly, when 7 out of 8 players in your biggest tournament grand finals are all running the newest DLC character, it's really hard to argue otherwise. Leroy didn't just break the game's balance, he broke the community's trust, and that's a patch that never shipped. But if Leroy was the moment the community lost faith, what happened next confirmed it was never coming back. If Leroy Smith was the accident, Fakumram was the confession, because releasing one broken DLC character is a mistake. Releasing 2 within months of each other is a business model. Fakumram dropped in March 2020, barely enough time for the community to finish being angry about Leroy, and he arrived with a toolkit that made Leroy look reasonable by comparison. Fakumram's throw loops from corner positions could deal over 80% damage from a single knockdown. One knockdown? That's it. You get knocked down once near a wall, and the round is functionally over. He'd grab you, slam you, reset the position, and grab you again and again. The damage per setup ranked among the highest in the entire Tekken 7 roster, which is a polite way of saying he could delete your health bar from a situation that every other character in the game would get maybe 40% from. Here's where it gets complicated though. Bandai Namco tried to fix him? They really did. Multiple balance patches rolled out across Season 3 and continued into Season 4. They adjusted frame data, tweaked damage scaling, reduced throw loop consistency, and none of it worked. The character was never truly fixed. Every patch either left him still dominant or broke something else about him in the process. It was like trying to patch a sinking ship by drilling new holes in slightly different spots. The community noticed, obviously, but this time the response wasn't just forum posts and angry tweets. Players were openly dropping the game, abandoning ranked queues, and canceling season passes in droves. People stopped asking how do we counter this, and started asking why should we support this game. That's not a balance complaint, that's a consumer revolt. People were voting with their wallets, and the message was crystal clear. We see what you're doing, and we're not paying for it anymore. The thing that makes Fakumram so important to this list isn't just that he was broken. It's that he proved the pattern was deliberate. Leroy could have been incompetence. Fakumram was confirmation, and the fact that multiple patches across 2 full seasons couldn't bring him to a balanced state suggests something darker. That the developers couldn't fix him without fundamentally admitting the design philosophy behind these DLC characters was rotten from the start. You can't patch your way out of a problem when the problem is the entire approach. But if you thought the pay-to-win accusations would make Bandai Namco rethink their DLC strategy for the next game, allow me to introduce you to Victor Chevalier. Every other character on this list has a clear problem. Eddie spams, Leroy tanks hits, Fakumram loops you in a corner until your controller starts crying. You can point at the broken thing and say that, fix that. Victor Chevalier doesn't give you that luxury. With Victor, nobody can even agree on what's wrong. He launched with Tekken 8 in January 2024, and he brought the game's brand new heat system with him. Here's how it works. During heat activation, Victor's moves deal significantly more chip and bonus damage than they normally would. His rushdown pressure strings were specifically designed to force you into situations where you're burning through defensive options, meaning he's not just hitting you, he's making you spend resources while he generates them. The result is unavoidable damage windows where Victor activates heat and you just have to hold the L. There's no counterplay, there's no just block. You eat the extra damage or you eat more of it. And the competitive scene noticed immediately. Victor appeared in top 5 character rankings at launch tournaments before a single patch had gone out. Not after months of optimization, not after some lab monster discovered a secret setup. Day 1, tournament players looked at this guy and went, yeah, that's a problem. But here's where it gets complicated. Patches came through and toned down his heat pressure and overall damage output. Reasonable adjustments should have cooled things down. He's still a competitive threat, still showing up, still generating complaints, and the community cannot figure out why. The fundamental debate remains completely unresolved. Is Victor Chevalier overpowered, or is Tekken 8's entire heat system the actual balance problem? Because Victor doesn't just use the system, he was built around it. Every string, every pressure sequence, every frame trap funnels into heat activation. Separating Victor is broken from heat is broken is like trying to figure out whether the flood ruined your house or the rain did. Technically different things. Practically identical outcome. He's the first character on this list where the community can't even agree on what the problem is. With Leroy, you could point at the power crush and say delete that. With Fakamram, you could point at the throw loops. With Victor, half the player base wants character nerfs, and the other half wants a system overhaul. And both sides have evidence, which is, not ideal for anyone trying to actually fix things. The worst part? If the heat system is the real issue, then Victor isn't even the disease. He's just the most obvious symptom, and symptoms don't go away until you treat the cause. But if you think an identity crisis over game mechanics sounds frustrating, wait until you meet the character who turned Tekken 8's entire design philosophy into a community civil war. Tekken 8 launched in January 2024 with one very clear message. We're going back to basics, fundamentals, martial arts, the stuff that made this franchise what it was before chainsaws and cheerleaders. And for a while, it felt like they meant it. Then people started running into Azucena online, and the entire promise evaporated overnight. Her whole deal is a coffee-fueled MMA style built around her Libertador stance, a evasive dancing transition that alters her moveset properties on the fly. You're blocking a string that starts as one thing, and halfway through it becomes something completely different because she slipped into Libertador with new frame data, new mix-up options, and new ways to make you guess wrong. It's Alisa's design philosophy with a fresh coat of paint and a perky caffeine aesthetic. Here's the thing, she's not even broken. Early tournament results put her squarely in mid-tier, which is almost worse from a community perspective. If she were overpowered, at least there'd be a clear argument for nerfs. Instead, she's just viable enough to show up in brackets and annoying enough to make every set feel like you're playing a different game than your opponent. Her stance transitions create strong mix-ups, and some of her damage scaling setups drew immediate controversy in the first patches. But the real issue was never her tier placement. The real issue is what she represents. Bandai Namco looked the entire community in the eye, said we hear you, back to fundamentals, and then put a grinning coffee farmer with evasive dance moves on the base roster. Casual players love her because she's unique and visually interesting. Purist players see her as confirmation that Tekken's martial arts identity crisis isn't a phase, it's the business model. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because it's the exact same argument the community had about Lucky Chloe and Alisa before her. And if you go back far enough, Eddie Gordo in 1997. The cycle has been running for 27 years. A new character drops with unconventional mechanics, casual players embrace it, competitive players call it a betrayal of fundamentals, forums catch fire, and then 6 months later, another one drops and the whole thing starts again. Azucena isn't the most hated character on this list. She's not the most broken, but she might be the most telling, because she proves the debate itself is permanent. The hatred isn't going away because it's not a bug in Tekken's design philosophy, it's the feature. Every generation gets its Eddie. Every generation fights the same war. And every generation loses because the gimmicks keep selling and the cycle keeps spinning. After 27 years, maybe the identity crisis is the identity. Tekken has one of the most violent family trees in all of gaming. Fathers throwing sons off cliffs, demons possessing corpses, wrestlers getting killed in bar fights, But across the entire franchise, there are characters who actually stayed dead, and the stories behind each one are way more twisted than you'd expect. So let's break down every confirmed death in Tekken, starting with the death that set everything else in motion: Kazumi Mishima. Here's the thing about Kazumi Mishima. She didn't appear in a single Tekken game until Tekken 7. 7 mainline entries into the franchise, and yet, when she finally showed up, she retroactively became the most important character in the entire series. Not Heihachi, not Kazuya, not Jin, Kazumi, the woman whose death set every single event in motion. Let me explain. For years, the devil gene was assumed to be a Mishima problem, something in Heihachi's bloodline, something dark and inherited that twisted every generation worse than the last. But Tekken 7 flipped that completely on its head. The devil gene didn't come from Heihachi at all. It came from Kazumi's side, the Hachijo bloodline, a family that carried this demonic power long before she ever married into the Mishima name. That one revelation recontextualized literally everything. Every cliff throw, every volcano, every demonic transformation across the entire franchise traces back to her. But Kazumi wasn't some willing vessel for evil. The devil gene manifested in her as a violent alter ego that she actively tried to fight off. She kept falling sick over and over, each episode getting worse as the demonic entity inside her clawed for control. Imagine watching someone you love deteriorate like that and having zero understanding of why. That was Heihachi's reality. His wife was slowly being consumed by something he couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't fix. Then one day, she stopped being Kazumi entirely. The devil gene took full control, and Kazumi transformed into her devil form and attacked Heihachi directly. Whatever love existed between them, whatever history they shared, it ended right there. Heihachi fought back and killed her. The woman he loved was gone, and he was the one who ended it. Now here's where it gets dark. Because killing his wife wasn't the end of the tragedy, it was the beginning. The moment Heihachi realized Kazumi carried the devil gene, he understood their son Kazuya had almost certainly inherited it too. And his response to that realization was, let's say, not great. He took his child to the edge of a cliff and threw him off, just to see what would happen. If Kazuya survived, the devil gene was in him. If he didn't, well, problem solved. Which is, not ideal parenting. Kazuya survived. Obviously. He clawed his way back from that fall, trained for years, and dedicated his entire existence to one singular goal: destroying his father. Every tournament entry, every betrayal, every volcanic showdown between father and son, all of it started because Heihachi killed Kazumi and then tried to kill the child she left behind. The tragic irony is almost unbearable. Heihachi killed his wife to stop the devil gene. He threw his son off a cliff to eliminate it from the bloodline, and all he accomplished was ensuring the cycle of violence would rage for generations. Kazuya passed the gene to Jin. Jin's devil powers spiraled into global conflict. The Mishima family tore the world apart for decades, and every single domino traces back to one moment: Heihachi standing over Kazumi's body, realizing what she was, and choosing violence as the solution. She appeared in one game, won, and she's the reason the entire franchise exists. But if Kazumi's death was the spark that lit the fuse for the entire Mishima saga, the next one proves that in this universe, even machines aren't safe from getting caught in the blast radius. Prototype Jack. Now, before you say anything, yes, we're talking about a robot, and yes, I'm counting it. Here's why. Prototype Jack was built by Dr. Boskanovich, a genius Russian scientist who essentially created the entire Jack line of combat robots. He was the original, the first model, the proof of concept that every future Jack would be built on, and the Mishima Zaibatsu, because of course they did, got their hands on the technology. This is kind of how the Mishima Zaibatsu operates, by the way. They see something useful, they take it, they use it until it breaks, and then they move on. People, robots, entire nations, doesn't matter. Everything is a resource to whoever's sitting in that CEO chair. So what happens to a prototype combat robot once the newer models roll off the assembly line? It gets pitted against them, which is a bit like stealing someone's first car and then entering it in a demolition derby against trucks. Prototype Jack was outclassed, outgunned, and ultimately destroyed by Jack 2, his own successor. His replacement tore him apart. And here's where it gets philosophically weird. Can a robot die? Like, actually die? Because if you smash a toaster, Nobody holds a funeral. But Prototype Jack wasn't a toaster. He was a combat-capable artificial entity with enough autonomy to enter a fighting tournament. The Tekken universe doesn't really answer this question directly, but it answers it indirectly because the consequences of Prototype Jack's destruction are treated with exactly the same narrative weight as any biological death in the series. Dr. Boskanovich was captured by Kazuya Mishima in the run-up to the second tournament and forced to remodel Prototype Jack as part of his captivity. Jack 2 was then entered into that same tournament specifically to rescue him. Prototype Jack was destroyed by Jack 2 during that encounter. The reasoning behind the kidnapping was simple. If you're the guy who built the prototype, you're the guy who can build the next one, and the one after that. Boskanovich became a contested asset across multiple games specifically because of what happened to his creation. His captivity, his forced labor, his entire arc through the series traces back to this moment. So whether or not you think a machine can truly die, the Tekken universe clearly thinks Prototype Jack's destruction mattered. It drove kidnappings, shifted corporate power, and turned a scientist into a bargaining chip for years. That's more narrative impact than some human characters get in their entire run, which is, not ideal for the humans. But if a robot's destruction can set off a chain of kidnappings and corporate power shifts, the next death on this list proves that not everything in Tekken ends in chaos. Sometimes it ends in something almost peaceful. Kuma won. In a franchise where people regularly get thrown into active volcanoes, the very first confirmed death is a bear dying of old age. I don't know what to tell you. Kuma the First served as Heihachi Mishima's personal bodyguard and loyal companion, which is already one of the most absurd sentences in fighting game history. This wasn't some random bear that wandered onto the tournament grounds. This was Heihachi's ride or die, his emotional support grizzly, a fully playable character who competed in the first two King of Iron Fist tournaments alongside people who could shoot lasers out of their foreheads. And he was genuinely effective. Kuma fought alongside Heihachi through 2 entire tournaments, serving as both a combatant and a bodyguard for one of the most dangerous men on the planet. The guy who threw his own son off a cliff looked at this bear and said, "Yeah, you're my best friend," which is, not ideal for the son. But here's where it gets weirdly wholesome. Sometime between Tekken 2 and Tekken 3, roughly a 19-year gap in the timeline, Kuma the First simply passed away from old age. No demonic possession, no volcanic execution, no ancient god of fighting hunting him down. He just got old and died. In Tekken, that basically qualifies as a happy ending. His death did serve one important purpose, though. It introduced the concept of generational succession that Tekken would lean on heavily going forward. Kuma II, his son, inherited literally everything. The role, the fighting style, the bizarre loyalty to Heihachi, even the unrequited crush on Panda. The torch got passed so cleanly that most casual players don't even realize they've been playing a completely different bear since Tekken 3. This pattern of successors replacing fallen originals shows up repeatedly throughout the series. King, Armor King, even the Jack robots all follow this same template. Turns out, Kuma the First dying quietly in his sleep accidentally established one of the franchise's most important narrative mechanics. But if a bear dying quietly in his sleep is the most peaceful exit on this list, the next one is the complete opposite. Because King Forge deserved better, and the Tekken universe made absolutely sure he didn't get it. King won. Most fighters in Tekken enter the King of Iron Fist tournament because they want power, revenge, or to prove they're the strongest. King entered because he wanted to build an orphanage. Let that sink in for a second. King I was a professional wrestler inspired by the legendary Tiger Mask and the Mexican luchador Fray Tormenta, a Catholic priest who wrestled to fund his orphanage. And King followed that same path almost exactly. He was a street-brawling orphan himself who found faith, became a Catholic priest, and dedicated his life to running an orphanage for abandoned children. He fought in tournaments, he won prize money, and he poured every bit of it into caring for those kids. In a franchise full of demons, corporate warlords, and people who throw their own kids off cliffs, King was just a genuinely good person, which is, not ideal for his life expectancy. Here's where it gets dark. Sometime after the second King of Iron Fist tournament, Ogre showed up. Ogre, for context, is an ancient supernatural entity, worshipped as a literal god of fighting. It had been dormant for centuries until it was awakened, and once it was free, It went on a rampage, hunting down the strongest martial artists on the planet. It attacked fighters like Baek Do-san, left some near death, and outright killed others. King was one of the ones who didn't survive. The guy who spent his entire career fighting for children who had nobody else was murdered by an ancient god that wanted to absorb his strength. There's no dramatic last stand in the games. No cinematic death scene. He's just gone. And that absence hits harder than any cutscene could, because you realize Tekken didn't even give him the dignity of dying on screen. He was simply too good for this universe, and the universe corrected that. But here's the part that genuinely gets me. King never once appeared without his Jaguar mask in the games. Not a single time. You never see his face. You never learn his real name. He maintained that mystery from the first tournament to his death, and somehow that makes the whole thing feel heavier. He wasn't fighting for fame or recognition. He was literally anonymous. And then one of his orphans picked up the mask. King II, one of the very children King I had saved and raised, took on the Jaguar mask and became the new king. An orphan who was given a second chance by a masked wrestler grew up to become that same masked wrestler. He carried the legacy forward, eventually entering the tournaments himself, fighting with the same style, wearing the same face that wasn't a face. It's one of the most emotionally resonant succession stories in fighting game history, and it only exists because a good man got killed for no reason other than being strong enough to attract a monster's attention. But if you want to understand why King Itaen is dead in the first place, you need to understand what killed him, and that means talking about Ogre. Up until this point, every death in Tekken had been grounded: a bear dying of old age, a wrestler getting killed in a bar fight. Sad, sure, but explainable. Then Ogre showed up and the franchise decided it was done being normal. Ogre was an ancient entity, worshipped as a literal god of fighting by civilizations that predated anything resembling modern history. It had been dormant for centuries, sleeping beneath the earth, bothering absolutely nobody. And it would have stayed that way if Heihachi Mishima hadn't sent a Tekken Force squadron to go poking around in ancient ruins they shouldn't have been poking around in. They stumbled onto the thing, woke it up, and every single one of them died for their trouble, which is, not ideal. But Ogre wasn't just some mindless monster on a rampage. The creature possessed the ability to absorb the fighting spirit and techniques of anyone it defeated, stealing their power and adding it to its own collection. So naturally, it started hunting the strongest martial artists on the planet. King 1, the masked wrestler who spent his life raising money for orphans, dead. Baek Do-san, one of the most skilled taekwondo fighters in the series, left for dead. Ogre went down the roster like a shopping list, systematically targeting anyone worth absorbing. As Ogre accumulated more power, it transformed into True Ogre, a massive, monstrous form representing the culmination of every fighter it had consumed. The thing looked like it belonged in a completely different franchise. This wasn't a family grudge match on top of a skyscraper. This was a teenager fighting a god. That teenager was Jin Kazama, and he had a very personal reason for being there. Ogre had attacked his mother, Jun Kazama, and she vanished, presumed dead. Jin wanted revenge. But beating a creature that had absorbed the power of dozens of elite fighters isn't exactly something you can do with good footwork and a strong right hook. Jin needed something extra, and he had it. The devil gene inherited from his father, plus the blood of both the Mishima and Kazama lineages. Jin fought True Ogre and destroyed it completely. Here's the part that makes Ogre's death genuinely unique. When True Ogre was destroyed, fighters who had been left for dead, like Baek, eventually recovered. The creature that built its entire existence around stealing power from others was ultimately killed by someone carrying their own inherited supernatural force strong enough to overwhelm it. The predator got out-predatored. Ogre also holds a weird distinction in Tekken history. It's the first major villain to have zero blood relation to the Mishima family. Every other big bad is a Mishima, married to a Mishima, or possessed by something connected to a Mishima. Ogre was the franchise's first truly supernatural apocalyptic threat, while still being tangentially connected to the family through the devil gene carried by the person who killed it. Its death simultaneously ended one threat and undid several others, functioning as both a conclusion and a mass recovery event. Not many characters can say their death literally brought people back from the brink. But then again, not many characters were ancient gods who collected fighters like trading cards. but if Ogre's death at least came at the hands of something worthy of it. The next one on this list has no such dignity, because Armor King 1 wasn't killed by a god. He was killed in a bar. Armor King 1. So we just covered an ancient god hunting down the strongest fighters on the planet and murdering a philanthropist wrestler. You'd think the deaths only get more dramatic from here. Turns out no. Armor King 1 was killed in a bar fight in Arizona by a drunk guy. I don't know what to tell you. Here's what happened. Craig Marduk was a Vale Tudo fighter who got himself kicked out of the entire sport for causing serious injuries to his opponents. He was out. He was bitter. And he was drinking a lot. At some point during this downward spiral, Marduk walked into a bar in Arizona and picked a fight with the wrong person. That person happened to be a professional wrestler in a black jaguar mask. Now, before you assume this was some kind of epic showdown between two elite fighters, it wasn't. This was a sloppy, drunken brawl that ended with Armor King I dead on the floor. Not in a tournament ring, not at the hands of a demon or an ancient god in a bar, because some guy couldn't handle being disgraced. But here's where it gets complicated. The killing was ruled as unintentional. Marduk didn't walk in planning to kill anyone. He was just violent, drunk, and out of control. He ended up behind bars, which, for ending someone's life in a drunken rage, feels like the universe gave him the "we acknowledge this is bad, but also you were really drunk" discount. And the reason that ruling makes more sense than it sounds is one tragic detail most people overlook. Armor King had a pre-existing heart condition. If you go back to his earlier appearances, there are hints showing him in physical distress outside the ring. By the time that bar fight happened, his body couldn't take what it might have shrugged off years earlier. A fight that should have been survivable for a professional wrestler of his caliber became fatal because his heart was already failing him, which is, not ideal. So Marduk goes to prison. Story over, right? Not even close. After getting out, Marduk decided the best way to celebrate his freedom was to enter the King of Iron Fist tournament and openly mock Armor King I's legacy, parading around like a trophy hunter showing off a kill. Hey everyone, remember that guy I beat to death in a bar? Yeah, I'm the toughest guy here now. This, predictably, did not go over well. King II, who had been mentored by Armor King I, was furious. And Armor King I's younger brother, who would eventually become Armor King II, dedicated himself entirely to hunting Marduk down. His whole motivation for entering the tournament was revenge for that Arizona bar. The whole thing is one of the most grounded storylines in a franchise where people regularly get thrown into volcanoes and punched by demons. No supernatural element, no ancient curse. Just a drunk man, a bad heart, and a bar fight that went too far. And somehow that makes it hit harder than any of the cosmic scale deaths in this series. A legendary fighter brought down not by a worthy opponent, but by circumstance, and a guy who couldn't hold his liquor. But if a senseless bar fight is the most grounded death on this list, the next one swings to the complete opposite extreme. Because nothing about what happened to Jinpachi Mishima was simple, clean, or quick. Every family has its black sheep. The Mishimas have about 4. But Jinpachi might be the only one who actually tried to do the right thing and got punished for it in the most horrific way imaginable. Jinpachi Mishima was the founder and original head of the Mishima Zaibatsu. He built the empire, he ran it, and when his son Heihachi decided he wanted control, Jinpachi tried to stop him, tried being the key word there. Heihachi didn't just overthrow his father. He imprisoned him beneath Hanmaru, not exiled, not banished, locked underneath a compound and left there for decades. Let that sink in. Decades in an underground cell with zero contact, zero sunlight, and eventually zero food. Jinpachi Mishima, the man who founded one of the most powerful organizations on the planet, starved beneath his own family's compound. His son just left him there to rot, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. As Jinpachi wasted away, a mysterious demonic entity took hold of him. The demon possessed Jinpachi, granting him supernatural powers in the process, but also slowly consuming his will. So now you've got a man trapped underground with demonic energy coursing through him, still in the same prison his son threw him in decades earlier. He couldn't even fade away in peace. The universe looked at this starving old man and said, actually, no, we're not done with you yet. Jinpachi stayed trapped in that state until an army of Jack 4 robots attacked Hanmaru and blew the structure apart. The assault that was meant to kill Heihachi ended up freeing Jinpachi from his underground prison instead. He emerged from the rubble, supernaturally sustained, possessed by a demon he never asked for, and immediately got to work. Here's the thing. Most people who escape decades of imprisonment want revenge. Jinpachi wanted to die. He seized control of the Mishima Zaibatsu and announced the 5th King of Iron Fist tournament with one explicit goal: find someone strong enough to kill him before the demon fully consumed him. He knew the entity inside him would eventually take over completely and unleash catastrophe on the world. He literally built a tournament so someone would put him down. That's not a villain's plan. That's a cry for help disguised as a fighting bracket, and it worked. His grandson, Jin Kazama, fought through the tournament and defeated Jinpachi in the final round. With the demon's hold broken and his body finally giving out, Jinpachi dissolved into dust and faded away. After decades of imprisonment, starvation, demonic possession, and a prolonged existence he never wanted, the man finally got to rest. Jinpachi is arguably the most tragic Mishima of them all. Heihachi chose violence. Kazuya embraced the devil. Jin struggled with both sides. But Jinpachi, he just wanted to stop the cycle. He tried to prevent his son from corrupting the Zaibatsu, and his reward was wasting away in a basement. He tried to use his unwanted extended life to end the bloodline's curse, and his reward was having his own grandson beat him into dust. Every single thing this man did was an attempt to fix his family's mess, and every single attempt cost him everything. But if Jinpachi's story is about a man who couldn't escape his family's curse even in death, the next one isn't really a person at all. And its death, if you can even call it that, is one of the messiest in the entire franchise. Most things in Tekken die when you kill them. Azazel didn't get that memo. Here's the thing about Azazel. It's not a person. It's not even really a creature in any traditional sense. It's a demonic entity that existed beyond the conventional rules of biological life, foretold to awaken during times of widespread war and chaos. And if there's one thing the Mishima family is good at producing, it's widespread war and chaos. So naturally, Azazel woke up during Tekken 6, right when Jin Kazama was busy starting a global conflict specifically to draw the thing out. Jin's plan was, to put it simply, start World War III so I can punch a demon god to death, which is either the most insane military strategy ever conceived or the most effective one because it actually worked. Kind of. Jin destroyed Azazel's physical body during the events of Tekken 6, punching through the creature's chest and sending them both into the abyss. Azazel's spirit survived the confrontation, and Zafina used an ancient ritual to seal it within her own body before it could reconstitute itself. Body gone, dust, done. But here's where it gets complicated. Destroying Azazel's physical form turned out to be roughly equivalent to smashing someone's phone and thinking you've deleted their cloud storage. The body was gone, sure, but Azazel's essence wasn't fully eradicated. Its remnants ended up bound within Zafina's body. So now Zafina, a woman who just wanted to protect an ancient temple and mind her own business, is walking around with a dormant demon god living inside her like the world's worst roommate. And that's where things stayed for a while. Throughout the entirety of Tekken 7, Azazel remained sealed within Zafina, quiet, contained, not dead, but not exactly alive either, just sitting in spiritual limbo inside a woman who presumably had zero say in the arrangement, which is, not ideal. Then Tekken 8 happened, and Kazuya deliberately lured Zafina to him and actively broke the seal on her arm himself, freeing Azazel from her body on purpose. Just like that, the entity that Jin sacrificed everything to destroy was back in play. The death that was supposed to be the culmination of an entire global war turned out to be temporary containment at best. Jin punched a god so hard its body disintegrated, and the thing just moved apartments. What makes Azazel's situation particularly interesting is its connection to the devil gene. This isn't some random monster that showed up for one game and disappeared. Azazel is tied directly to the supernatural curse that has defined the Mishima saga for generations. The same power that corrupted Kazuya, the same gene that Jin has been trying to purge from existence. Azazel isn't a side story. It's woven into the DNA of the franchise's central conflict. Literally, the philosophical tension here mirrors something Tekken has been doing for decades. Physical destruction means nothing when spiritual persistence is on the table. You can throw someone into a volcano, shoot them off a cliff, or obliterate a demon's corporeal form, and the essence of the thing just finds somewhere else to be. Azazel's death isn't really a death. It's a transformation, a relocation. The body is a vessel, and vessels can be replaced. And because Azazel's seal was destabilized during Tekken 8, this story isn't even finished yet. The consequences of Jin's sacrifice in Tekken 6 are still actively unfolding, still being rewritten by new developments. Most dead characters in Tekken have the courtesy to stay in one narrative state. Azazel can't even commit to being sealed, let alone being dead. But if Azazel's ambiguous demise feels frustrating, at least it's consistent with the franchise's most important rule. In the Mishima universe, nothing stays buried, and nobody proves that rule better than the Patriarch himself. This is the one, the death that every single entry on this list has been building toward. Heihachi Mishima didn't just die. He completed a cycle that started the moment he killed Kazumi and threw his 5-year-old son off a cliff. And the way it happened is so poetically brutal that it almost doesn't feel real. During Tekken 7 story mode, Heihachi and Kazuya finally had their last fight. Not their latest fight, their last one. And here's the thing that makes this so much worse. Heihachi won the first round. He actually beat Kazuya in their initial clash. The old man, no devil gene, no supernatural powers, just decades of raw martial arts mastery and sheer stubbornness, managed to put his son down. For a moment, it looked like pure human willpower had triumphed over the devil gene itself. And then he did exactly what you'd expect Heihachi Mishima to do. He threw Kazuya's body into the mouth of a volcano, just casually disposed of him like he was dumping evidence. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's the cliff throw from decades earlier, except now it's a volcano. Heihachi really said, let me upgrade the method this time, which is, not ideal for father-son relationships. But Kazuya didn't stay dead. He never stays dead. The devil gene pulled him back from what should have been complete incineration. The man crawled out of an active volcanic crater through sheer hatred and demonic power. He came back for one final round, and this time, the fight went differently. Kazuya fully embraced the devil gene, and Heihachi, for all his strength and stubbornness, simply couldn't overcome it a second time. Kazuya killed him, and then he threw Heihachi's body into the exact same volcanic crater that Heihachi had just used to try to kill him. Let that sink in for a second. Heihachi threw Kazuya off a cliff when he was 5. Kazuya spent his entire life climbing back up, and at the end of everything, after decades of tournaments, betrayals, and attempted murders, Kazuya threw his father into a volcano and watched him burn. Heihachi was consumed by volcanic fire. Complete incineration. No devil gene to save him. No resurrection program. No demonic entity to animate his corpse. Just fire, and then nothing. The narrative symmetry here is staggering. Heihachi killed Kazumi because of the devil gene. He threw Kazuya off a cliff because he feared the devil gene. He spent his entire life trying to control, contain, or destroy the supernatural power that his wife's bloodline introduced into his family. And in the end, that exact power is what killed him. The devil gene won. It always was going to win. Heihachi just refused to accept that for about 40 years. But here's the part that elevates this from a great death to maybe the best death in fighting game history. Heihachi had the will, the skill, and the determination to beat Kazuya once. He executed his plan, threw him in the volcano, walked away, and it still wasn't enough, because Kazuya is not a problem you can solve by throwing him into things. Heihachi tried a cliff, he tried a volcano, neither worked. The man's entire parenting philosophy was throw child off high place and hope for the best, and it failed him every single time. Now, I do have to address the Kuma-sized elephant in the room. Heihachi appeared in Tekken 8. He showed up despite being very clearly, very canonically, very thoroughly dead. And look, at this point in the video, you already know how Tekken handles death. It's more of a suggestion than a rule. In Tekken 8, Heihachi was revealed to have actually survived the volcano, kept alive through sheer force of will, and eventually recovered by someone who restored him. Because of course he did. The franchise has a relationship with permanent death that can best be described as casual. But that's the thing about Tekken. Every character on this list, from Kuma dying of old age to Jinpachi dissolving into dust, to Armor King getting killed in a bar, They all exist in a universe where death is simultaneously devastating and weirdly temporary. Characters die with incredible narrative weight and emotional payoff, and then the next game goes, actually. What if they didn't, though? It's maddening. It's also kind of beautiful, because it means every death matters in the moment, even if the franchise reserves the right to change its mind later. Heihachi Mishima burned in a volcano. His son put him there, and somewhere, Kazumi is probably watching and thinking, yeah, that tracks. Tekken is one of the longest-running fighting game franchises in history. 30 years, 8 mainline entries, and a family feud so convoluted it makes the Greek gods look well-adjusted. Today, I'm breaking down the complete Tekken timeline from the very first punch thrown in 1994 to the chaos of Tekken 8, starting with a game that had no business becoming a dynasty, Tekken. In 1994, a little arcade cabinet showed up and quietly changed fighting games forever. Tekken hit arcades running on custom Namco hardware that made it one of the most technically impressive machines you could sit down at. While Street Fighter had the entire genre locked down in 2D, Tekken looked at that and said, cool, what if we added a whole extra dimension? And here's the thing. This wasn't some massive roster brawler. The original Tekken had 8 playable characters. That's it. Kazuya, Jack, King, Yoshimitsu, Armor King, Kuma, Law, and Anna. You could fit the entire cast on a single poster and still have room for the logo. For context, modern fighting games launch with triple that, and people still complain about the roster being too small. But those 8 characters were enough to introduce the concept that would drive the entire franchise for 3 decades. The King of Iron Fist Tournament, a fighting tournament hosted by Heihachi Mishima, patriarch of the Mishima clan, a family whose idea of bonding is throwing each other off cliffs. Kazuya enters the tournament specifically to fight his own father. Not for money, not for glory, just pure generational resentment turned into a bracket. When the PlayStation 1 port dropped in December 1995, it brought that arcade experience into living rooms worldwide. Suddenly, millions of players were learning about the Mishima bloodline, and nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted that this simple tournament premise would spiral into a saga involving devils, genetic curses, and at least 3 separate Apocalypse Iosas scenarios. The game was small. The ambitions were modest. 8 fighters and a family grudge. That's all it took to build a 30-year empire. But Tekken 2 would take that foundation and turn it into something far more ambitious, starting with a roster that more than doubled overnight. Tekken 2. Here's the thing about Tekken 2. Most people remember it as the one with more characters. And sure, the roster jumped from 8 to 25, which is a pretty significant leap for a sequel that dropped just 1 year after the original. Arcade cabinets got it in 1995. PlayStation owners had it by 1996. But the roster expansion isn't what made this game important, not even close. What made Tekken 2 matter is something that's easy to take for granted now, because it's so baked into the franchise's DNA that people forget how much it elevated the formula. Fully rendered cinematic character endings that didn't just celebrate your win, but actually deepened the lore. Now, other fighting games had individual endings before this. Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat both gave characters unique story conclusions back in the early 90s, but those were mostly still images, text crawls, maybe a short animation. Cool, thanks. Very meaningful. Tekken 2 looked at that and said, we're going further. Every single character got their own cinematic ending sequence, and while not all of them were treated as canon, the ones that were carried real weight. They set up rivalries, they established motivations, they created plot threads that would carry forward into Tekken 3, 4, 5, and beyond. The game pushed the idea that a fighting game's story should feel like it mattered, told one character at a time, through the simple act of winning, and I can prove how much this mattered. The Mishima revenge narrative, the thing that defines this franchise for the next 3 decades, started in Tekken 1 with Kazuya throwing Heihachi off a cliff, but Tekken 2 is where it got its real scaffolding. Kazuya's descent into darkness, Heihachi's scheming, the Devil Gene's growing influence, all of it deepened and formalized through these ending sequences. Players weren't just learning combos anymore, they were piecing together a family saga built on betrayal, supernatural power, and an alarming amount of cliff throwing. Let me be clear, no other fighting game in 1995 was producing cinematics at this level of ambition for its story delivery. Tekken 2 quietly raised the bar for what narrative presentation in a fighting game could look like, and it did it on a PlayStation 1 one with polygon characters that had roughly 14 triangles per face. But if Tekken 2 laid the foundation, Tekken 3 burned the house down and rebuilt it from scratch. Tekken 3. Namco did something in 1997 that no fighting game developer in their right mind would ever attempt. They killed the protagonist, not in a cutscene, not as a fake out. They literally removed Kazuya Mishima from the playable roster, jumped the story forward an entire decade to 2005, and handed the keys to his teenage son, Jin, a character nobody had ever heard of. In a genre where roster loyalty is everything, where players will boycott a game because their main got nerfed, Namco retired multiple fan favorites and said, "Trust us." And here's the thing, it worked. Tekken 3 hit arcades in September 1997 and the PlayStation in July 1998, and it didn't just survive the backlash, it became the creative peak of the entire franchise. The roster expanded to over 23 characters, but the real story was who wasn't there. Legacy fighters were gone, replaced by newcomers like Eddie Gordo, Hwoarang, and Xiaoyu, characters that played nothing like the old guard. People walked up to arcade cabinets, scrolled through the select screen, and genuinely couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Where's my guy? What do you mean he's not in the game?" But Namco wasn't just being reckless. They were rebuilding. The combat engine got a fundamental overhaul with the introduction of sidestepping, a mechanic that let players dodge laterally for the first time. Sounds simple? It wasn't. Sidestepping completely restructured how high-level Tekken worked. Suddenly, every attack had a spatial dimension. You weren't just thinking about timing anymore, you were thinking about angles. It turned the game from a back-and-forth lane into an actual arena, and competitive play has never been the same since. Then, there's the lore bombshell. Kazuya wasn't just dead. He was alive, possessed by a supernatural entity called Devil. Everything players thought they understood about the Mishima bloodline conflict, the father-son rivalry, the tournament grudges, all of it got reframed as something darker, something not entirely human. The Devil gene wasn't just a plot device. It became the spine of the entire franchise going forward. Tekken 3 is what happens when a developer bets everything on reinvention and actually pulls it off. But pulling it off created a new problem. Where do you go after your creative peak? Turns out, you throw canon out the window entirely. Tekken Tag Tournament. Here's the thing about Tekken Tag Tournament. It doesn't matter. Literally none of it is canon. Not a single fight, not a single outcome, not one dramatic slow-motion knockout means anything to the actual Tekken timeline. And somehow, that's exactly why everyone loves it. After 3 games of family betrayal, cliff throwing, and demonic possession, Namco decided the franchise deserved a party. And what a party it was. Over 40 playable characters pulled from every corner of the series, dead or alive, villain or hero, all thrown into a 2 versus 2 tag team blender with zero narrative justification. Kazuya fighting alongside the guy who threw him off a cliff? Sure. 2 different versions of the same character on one team? Why not? There were no rules because there was no story, just vibes. The tag out system was the real star here. Mid-combo, you could swap your fighter for their part, extending combos in ways that felt genuinely new. It wasn't just a gimmick either. These tag mechanics planted seeds that would grow into core design philosophy for future entries. Namco was experimenting, and the experiment worked, but the timing is what really made this game legendary. Tekken Tag Tournament hit arcades in September 1999 and landed on the PlayStation 2 in March 2000 as one of the console's marquee launch titles. If you bought a PS2 in that launch window, there's a solid chance this was the first disc you put in the tray. For millions of players, Tekken Tag Tournament wasn't just a fighting game, it was the reason they owned a PS2. And honestly, it looked incredible for the time. Namco used it as a full technical showcase for what the PS2 could do, and the answer was, make fighting games look really, really good. Character models were sharper, animations were smoother, and stages had a level of detail that made the PlayStation 1 era look like finger paintings. It was a tech demo disguised as a celebration, disguised as a fighting game. No story mode, no canonical weight, no consequences whatsoever. Just the entire Tekken roster having the time of their lives. It's the franchise's victory lap, and it earned every second of it. But the party had to end eventually, because Tekken 4 was about to try something very different, and not everyone was going to be happy about it. Tekken 4 almost killed the franchise. And I'm not being dramatic. This is the game that made the competitive community genuinely consider walking away from Tekken forever. Released in arcades in 2001 and hitting the PlayStation 2 in 2002, Tekken 4 set its story somewhere somewhere around 2005 to 2007 and featured 23 playable characters. On paper, that sounds fine. In practice, Namco decided to take everything players loved about Tekken 3 and Tag Tournament and throw it directly into a wood chipper. Here's the thing. The developers wanted to innovate. They wanted Tekken to feel more realistic, more grounded, more dynamic. So they introduced uneven stage terrain. Floors had slopes, walls closed in on you. Environmental hazards could literally change the outcome of a match. They overhauled the combo system so dramatically that years of muscle memory and classic strategies became completely useless overnight. They introduced Kombat, a customizable fighter that could copy moves from other characters, which sounds cool until you realize the entire mechanical foundation underneath him was broken. And look, innovation is great. Nobody wants a franchise to stagnate, but there's a difference between pushing boundaries and pushing your entire player base off a cliff. The blocking system felt wrong. Movement felt restricted. Matches that used to be about reads and spacing suddenly came down to who got stuck in a corner against a wall they couldn't escape. Veterans who had spent years mastering Tekken's fundamentals loaded up Tekken 4, played 3 matches, and said no thank you with a politeness I'm being generous in assuming. The competitive scene didn't just cool off, it nearly evaporated. Tournament attendance dropped, community forums turned into complaint threads. For a franchise that had been on an unbroken winning streak since 1994, this was genuinely unprecedented. Now, credit where it's due. Tekken 4 tried things. The story mode was actually decent. The atmosphere was moody and interesting. Some fans genuinely love this game to this day, and they're not wrong too. But the fighting game community doesn't grade on artistic intent. They grade on whether the game is fun to play competitively, and the verdict was brutal. How brutal? Well, when Tekken 5 came out, it reversed nearly every major mechanical change Tekken 4 introduced. Flat stages came back, classic movement returned. The combo system was rebuilt from the ground up. That's not a sequel evolving naturally. That's a developer looking at the damage report and hitting the undo button as fast as humanly possible. But that undo button? It produced something incredible. Tekken 5. After the disaster that was Tekken 4's competitive reception, Namco did something that massive game studios almost never do. They listened, and then they actually fixed it. Tekken 5 hit arcades in November 2004 and PlayStation 2 in 2005. And from the moment players got their hands on it, the message was crystal clear. This was classic Tekken. Fast, aggressive, mechanically tight, and built from the ground up to reward the people who'd stuck with the franchise through its awkward experimental phase. The roster packed in 32 characters, bringing back legacy fighters that Tekken 4 had either sidelined or straight up ignored. Fan favorites who'd been collecting dust since Tekken 3 were suddenly back in the rotation like nothing happened. It was like Namco walked into the arcade, looked the community dead in the eyes, and said, "We're sorry, here's everyone you missed. Please stop being mad at us." But here's the thing, it wasn't just a nostalgia play. They didn't just revert to Tekken 3 and call it a day. The crush system was the proof. Remember how Tekken 4's low block mechanics basically broke competitive play? Crouch, block low, wait for your opponent to get bored and make a mistake. Riveting stuff. The crush system solved that by giving certain moves the ability to automatically evade or power through attacks based on your character's motion. You couldn't just turtle your way to victory anymore. You had to actually engage. You had to actually fight, which is, the entire point of a fighting game. The arcade reception wasn't just positive, it was salvation level. Tekken 5 didn't just recover the franchise's competitive reputation, it became the tournament standard globally. Arcades that had quietly shelved their Tekken 4 cabinets were suddenly packed again. Tournament organizers who'd been drifting toward other fighters came back. Players who'd written the series off entirely picked up a controller and realized Namco had pulled off the impossible. The competitive scene didn't just revive, it exploded, and Namco kept pushing. Tekken 5.1 dropped as an arcade update with dedicated balance changes, proving this wasn't a one-and-done apology tour. They were actively maintaining competitive integrity, tweaking frame data based on real tournament feedback. For a franchise that had nearly lost its entire competitive player base one game earlier, that commitment meant everything. The story continued the Mishima saga right where Tekken 4 left off, advancing the generational blood feud while keeping the gameplay rooted in what made Tekken great. Smart innovation layered on top of proven fundamentals. No gimmicks, no stage hazards, no reinventing the wheel because someone at Namco got bored on a Tuesday. Just a fighting game that respected its audience enough to give them exactly what they wanted, then quietly added depth they didn't know they needed. But Namco wasn't done refining, because Tekken 5 was about to get an upgrade that would push it from great to genuinely legendary. Tekken 5, Dark Resurrection. So Tekken 5 was was already great, we've established that. But Namco looked at it and said, yeah, we can do better, and then they actually did. Dark Resurrection hit arcades in September 2005, and it wasn't a sequel. It was Tekken 5 with every rough edge sanded down, every imbalance addressed, and a handful of new fighters thrown in for good measure. This is the version competitive players actually remember when they talk about Tekken 5. The original was the foundation. Dark Resurrection was the house. The roster expanded to over 36 characters, and the most notable addition was Lily de Rochefort, a rich Monegasque teenager who fights with a ballet-inspired style because, you know, that's a completely normal hobby for a billionaire's daughter. Lily became an instant fan favorite and an equally instant source of competitive frustration. Her evasive movement and counter-hit game made her a nightmare to deal with online, and the debate over whether she was genuinely overpowered or just annoying has never fully been resolved. Some arguments are eternal. The story mode got expanded too, with deeper character interactions and additional narrative scenes that fleshed out individual arcs beyond what vanilla Tekken 5 offered. It wasn't revolutionary storytelling by any stretch, but it gave players a reason to run through the mode with every character on the roster instead of just their main. Here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough though. Dark Resurrection went through multiple arcade update iterations, versions 1.0 through 1.3, each one tweaking frame data, adjusting damage values, and rebalancing matchups based on competitive play. That sounds completely normal now. Every fighting game does live balance patches, but in 2005, this was genuinely forward-thinking. Namco was essentially running a live service model before the term existed, using arcade operators as the delivery system instead of internet updates. The iterative patching philosophy that defines modern competitive games started in cabinets like these. Then, in March 2007, Dark Resurrection landed on PlayStation 3, and it proved something the industry had been skeptical about for years. You could take an arcade game and port it to a home console without gutting the mechanics. The PS3 version maintained full mechanical integrity, frame-perfect inputs, identical hitboxes, the whole package. It sounds basic now, but this was the proof of concept that changed how fighting game developers approached console releases permanently. Before Dark Resurrection, Arcade Perfect was marketing language. After it, the expectation became standard, a polished, balanced, mechanically pristine fighting game. But Namco wasn't done pushing the franchise forward. Tekken 6 would introduce a system so controversial, it's still causing arguments nearly 2 decades later. Tekken 6? Tekken 6 introduced a single mechanic that split the entire community in half, and it's still causing arguments to this day. The Rage system. Simple concept. When your health drops below a certain threshold, your attacks get stronger. You glow red, you hit harder, and suddenly that round you were losing. It's not over yet. On paper, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable comeback mechanic. In practice, it meant that a player who was outperforming their opponent for 90% of the round could lose to 2 powered-up hits at the end. Competitive players lost their minds. Casual players loved it. And Bandai Namco looked at both groups, shrugged, and made it a permanent franchise mechanic from that point forward. Which is, you know, not ideal for the people who hated it. But here's the thing. Whether you love Rage or despise it, you can't deny it fundamentally changed how Tekken rounds play out. Every match now has a built-in dramatic arc. You're never truly safe with a health lead, and you're never truly dead when you're behind. It turned every close round into a spectator event. The competitive community argued it rewarded losing. The casual community argued it rewarded clutch play. Both were kinda right. Beyond the mechanical controversy, Tekken 6 made a much bigger statement about what the franchise wanted to be. The scenario campaign mode was the series' first real attempt at cinematic storytelling. Not just arcade mode endings with 30 seconds of CGI, an actual narrative campaign with cutscenes, dialogue, and a story that tried to tie the entire Mishima bloodline together. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. The beat-em-up gameplay sections felt clunky, and the AI companions had the survival instincts of a wet napkin. But the ambition was real, and it laid the groundwork for everything Tekken 7 would eventually accomplish with its story. The roster ballooned to over 40 characters, and the story escalated the Mishima family conflict to genuinely global stakes. Jin Kazama literally starts a world war using the Mishima Zaibatsu, dragging every character into a conflict that made previous Tekken tournaments look like family picks. These weren't small narrative steps. The franchise was swinging for the fences, planting seeds for payoffs that wouldn't fully land until Tekken 7 years later. Tekken 6, Bloodline Rebellion dropped in arcades in December 2008, overhauling character balance and adding new fighters like Lars and Alisa. The console ports followed in late 2009 on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, giving the arcade scene roughly a year's head start on refining the meta. The game pushed the timeline forward and escalated the Mishima family war to a scale the series had never attempted. Tekken was no longer content being just a fighting game with good mechanics. It wanted to be dramatic. It wanted to be cinematic. And for better or worse, Tekken 6 was the moment that decision became permanent. But if Tekken 6 decided the franchise needed drama, the next entry decided it needed a vacation from canon entirely. Tekken Tag Tournament 2. If the first tag tournament was a reunion, Tag Tournament 2 was the entire family tree showing up at once. Every single one of them. 50+ playable characters, all crammed into one game, making it the largest roster in Tekken history at that point, and none of it was canon, which meant Namco could do literally whatever they wanted. The game hit arcades in September 2011 before landing on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in September 2012, and the pitch was simple. Take every fighter from every era of Tekken, put them all in the same room, and let players go absolutely feral with team compositions. Characters who were dead in the main timeline, playable. Characters who hadn't been seen since Tekken 3, right there on the select screen. Legacy fighters standing next to newcomers like they'd always been neighbors. It was less of a fighting game and more of a playable encyclopedia. The tag mechanics themselves got a serious overhaul from the original tag tournament. Character synergy actually mattered now. You couldn't just pick two random fighters and mash your way through. Team composition had real strategic depth, with tag combos, tag throws, and partner-specific interactions that rewarded players for understanding how their duo worked together. It was the thinking person's party game, if the party involved suplexing a bear into a dinosaur. But here's where it gets interesting. Namco also went all in on character customization this time around. Hats, accessories, full outfit swaps, ridiculous cosmetic nonsense that let you turn serious martial artists into walking fashion disasters. It sounds trivial, but it signaled something important. The franchise was leaning hard into player expression. Your Tekken experience didn't have to look like anyone else's. Behind the scenes, the arcade version went through iterative updates from version 1.0 all the way through 1.3 across 2011 and 2012, with Namco constantly tweaking balance and refining matchups. When you've got 50+ characters to keep in check, that's not a patch cycle. That's a full-time job. The original Tag Tournament gave us around 40 characters, and it felt massive. Tag Tournament 2 looked at that number and said those are rookie numbers. It was celebratory, excessive, and a little bit wistful, because in hindsight, this was the last time Tekken would just let loose and have fun without worrying about canon consequences. A send-off to everything the series had built over nearly 2 decades, all playable in one place, which makes it the perfect farewell before the franchise decided to get deadly serious again, because Tekken 7 wasn't interested in celebrating the past, it was interested in ending it. Tekken 7, 23 years. That's how long the Mishima family had been throwing each other off cliffs, shooting each other with satellites, and generally making Thanksgiving dinner look like a war zone. And Tekken 7 finally said, alright, let's end this. The game hit arcades between 2014 and 2015, with the full console release landing on June 2nd, 2017 for PS4, Xbox One, and PCs. The story is set in 2019, and it came packing an expanded episode prologue, story mode that had one very specific mission: resolve the Mishima saga once and for all. But before we get to how it ends, let's talk about how it reframes everything, because Tekken 7 pulled one of the boldest narrative moves in fighting game history. It introduced Kazumi Mishima, Heihachi's wife, the woman we'd heard almost nothing about for over 2 decades. Turns out, she's the reason everything went wrong. Kazumi carried the devil gene. She married into the Mishima bloodline and passed that curse directly to Kazuya, which means every single horrible thing that happened across this entire timeline, every betrayal, every demonic transformation, every volcano and cliff and corporate takeover, traces back to her. The story reveals that Heihachi killed Kazumi after she tried to assassinate him, and that act of violence is what broke him. He threw Kazuya off that cliff not out of cruelty for cruelty's sake, but because he was terrified his son carried the same curse his mother did. Does that justify it? Absolutely not, but it recontextualizes the entire saga. Heihachi goes from cartoonish villain to tragic monster in the span of one game. That's genuinely impressive writing for a franchise where a bear has been a tournament competitor since 1994. The roster launched with 37 characters and ballooned to over 50 through 3 years of post-launch DLC seasons, which kept the competitive scene fed with fresh matchups and constant meta shifts. Mechanically, the rage system got refined with the new rage dash technique, letting players push forward aggressively during their powered-up state instead of just sitting on a rage yard and waiting. It rewarded offense, it rewarded confidence, and it made for incredible tournament moments. Speaking of tournaments, this is where Tekken finally got its flowers. Tekken 7 achieved legitimate esports status with global professional circuits, including EVO, the PlayStation Pro League, and the ESL Pro series. Fighting games had always been competitive, but Tekken 7 turned that competition into a spectator sport. Millions of viewers, sponsored players, production value that would have been unthinkable during the Tekken 3 arcade days. The franchise went from that game at the arcade to a globally broadcast competitive platform. And here's what makes Tekken 7 genuinely special in the context of this entire timeline. It tried to end the story, not tease the next chapter, not leave a cliffhanger for Tekken 8. It treated the Mishima saga like a story with a conclusion. Heihachi and Kazuya have their final battle. One of them dies. The narrator closes the book. For the first time in the franchise's history, the credits rolled, and it felt like an ending, not a comma. Of course, you can't keep a Mishima down forever, and the saga that was supposedly finished, it had one more chapter left. Tekken 8, here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. Tekken 7 ended, like actually ended. The Mishima saga, the blood feud that had been driving this franchise since 1994, got its conclusion. Heihachi Mishima, the man who threw his own son off a cliff and somehow became gaming's most iconic terrible father, was finally, definitively dealt with. Story over. Credits roll. 30 years of family therapy wrapped up in a volcano. So how do you make Tekken 8? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the actual design problem Bandai Namco had to solve. You can't just pretend the ending didn't happen. You can't pull a, it was all a dream. The audience watched the conclusion, they felt. And now you're asking them to buy another ticket to a show that already had its curtain call. The answer, it turns out, was to stop asking what happens next and start asking who Tekken is actually for. Tekken 8 launched on January 26th, 2024 across PS5, Xbox Series XS, and PC. It shipped with 32 playable characters and post-launch DLC seasons already mapped out. Visually, the thing is absurd. The next-generation graphics engine delivers character models and stage detail that make Tekken 7 look like it was rendered on a calculator. Every pore, every particle effect during a rage drive is operating at a level the series has never touched. But the real story isn't the graphics. It's the controller. Tekken 8 introduced a dual control philosophy that split the community down the middle. On one side, Special Style, a simplified control mode designed to let newcomers actually participate without memorizing 47 input combinations for a basic combo. On the other side, Tekken Pro Mode, the full mechanical depth that competitive players have spent decades mastering. Same game, two completely different ways to play it, and the debate has been, to put it mildly, intense. Competitive purists argue that Special Style dilutes the game's integrity, that Tekken's identity has always been built on execution barriers, on the gap between someone who knows their character and someone who doesn't. I spent 400 hours learning electrics, and now some guy can press one button. That's the energy. But here's the counter-argument, and it's not a small one. Fighting games have been bleeding players for years. The genre's biggest problem has never been depth. It's been the cliff face new players hit in the first 30 minutes. You can have the most mechanically brilliant game ever made, but if nobody sticks around long enough to discover that brilliance, you've built a museum that nobody visits. Special Style isn't dumbing Tekken down. It's building a door where there used to be a wall, and that might be the most important design decision in the franchise's history. More important than rage, more important than sidestepping, because it's not a mechanical addition, it's a philosophical statement about what fighting games need to be in order to survive. Tekken 8 is saying, out loud, that accessibility and depth aren't enemies. They're the same thing viewed from different angles. The story mode continues the Mishima saga despite Tekken 7's apparent closure, which is either brave or stubborn depending on who you ask. The bloodline keeps going. The fists stay iron. And 30 years after Kazuya got thrown off that cliff, the franchise built on family violence is still finding new ways to justify its existence. Not all franchises get to say that. Most don't make it past a decade. Tekken has survived bad entries, genre shifts, the death of arcades, and the near extinction of fighting games as a mainstream category, and it's still here, still swinging. 30 years of iron fists. The bloodline continues. From legendary champions to dark overlords, the final bosses of Street Fighter each met their fate through epic clashes that reshaped the fighting world. Their defeats aren't just about lost battles, they're about shattered legacies, unleashed powers, and the spiritual cost of ultimate rivalries. Let's begin by uncovering how the mighty Muay Thai Emperor's downfall set the stage for everything that followed. Sagat Sagat is the original final boss of Street Fighter, the undefeated Muay Thai emperor, towering over every challenger. Before Ryu came along, Sagat was invincibility personified, a legend whose name alone made opponents back down. His mastery of tiger shots and brutal strikes made him a mountain no one could climb. But then, in their legendary battle, that image breaks. Ryu's Shoryuken lands the decisive blow, carving a huge diagonal scar across Sagat's chest, an iconic wound that physically and symbolically shatters the Muay Thai king. What makes this moment unforgettable is the dark truth. Ryu's uppercut is powered by Satsui no Hado, a murderous energy Ryu barely controls. It's not just a punch, but a shared spiritual cost. Sagat's fall and Ryu's brush with darkness tangled forever in that strike. Before you dismiss Sagat as just a guy with a scar, hear me out. He survives the fight and lives on, but the legend of the invincible emperor dies that day. Sagat's identity fractures, haunted by loss and scar, sparking a thirst for revenge. This drives him into Shadaloo's shadowy world, where he abandons his honor for a darker path. Joining Masaber Bison's gang marks a brutal loss of pride, turning Sagat from champion to menace. His story isn't about death, but the death of a myth. The mountain that once seemed eternal toppled. That scar defines his legacy. The moment the unstoppable was stopped, with a cost that lingers long after. But if you think Sagat's fall is the darkest boss story, wait until you meet Shadaloo's tyrant. M. Bison isn't your typical final boss who just falls over and stays dead. His original body was destroyed by the very psycho power that made him terrifying, which is already a bad look for a villain meant to be immortal. But here's the twist. Bison's life is tied to a network of clone bodies and soul transfers, making him the ultimate disposable dictator. Take out one body, no problem, another is ready to house his consciousness. Before you write this off as comic book nonsense, the lore stays consistent. In Street Fighter Alpha 3, the destruction of Bison's base and Psycho Drive seemed like the end, yet he returns every time, proving that was just one vessel burning up. Then there's the famous but ambiguous moment in Street Fighter 2 where Akuma interrupts the final fight and nearly kills Bison with Shungoku Satsu. But that fight is more of an Easter egg than main story. Bison still keeps surviving. His immortality is tied to Shadaloo's psycho power farms and cloning tech, basically sick batteries, fueling his soul's repeated resurrection. Each defeat is dramatic but rarely final, until Street Fighter V, A Shadow Falls, where Ryu delivers not just a knockout to Bison's body, but to the psycho power itself. Using the power of nothingness, Ryu dissolves Bison into dust, toppling Shadaloo's empire and ending his influence. This death isn't just flair, it marks the fall of a global criminal regime powered by dark energy. With Bison gone, new powers rise. Psycho Power's corruption is cleansed, at least for now. Bison's final death isn't just a defeat, but pulling the plug on a system that sustained him through clones and soul tricks. A fitting end for a villain who was never just one body, but a spreading poison holding an empire hostage. If you think that's a lot for one guy's death, just wait until we get to Akuma's messy story. Akuma is the embodiment of the Satsui no Hado fully embraced, the terrifying surge of murderous intent that turns a fighter into an unstoppable force of destruction. Where Ryu struggles to resist this dark power, Akuma has surrendered to it completely, letting it consume his soul and strip away all traces of humanity. His signature technique, the Shungoku Satsu, or Raging Demon, isn't just a flashy finisher, it's a soul-killing move that drags opponents into an endless torment, obliterating their very essence beyond the physical. Before you think Akuma is just a classic big bad, hear me out. He is more metaphor than mere villain. Akuma represents the ultimate temptation for fighters, the eternal challenge dangling just beyond reach. He's the dark horizon for Ryu and anyone seeking power without limits. While many bosses in Street Fighter have definitive deaths, Akuma's fate is consistently ambiguous. He shows up as a rare secret boss, often defeated by players, but never canonically bested by any story opponent. The lore leaves his survival open-ended, like a constant shadow waiting to pounce again. Take his legendary fights with Oro and Gen, masters who have matched or even survived his most lethal attacks. Their duels often end in draws or retreats, never with Akuma's death. Even when Akuma uses the Shungoku Satsu, it's a technique that brutally destroys souls, but his own soul remains untouched, still burning with raw killing intent. He is the dark reflection of what power unbound looks like, the path Ryu fears to tread but could theoretically take. Akuma's role is also a narrative device. He forces characters and players to confront the cost of surrendering to rage. Killing him outright would end that conversation. So, instead, he lives on as an eternal threat, a metaphor for the price of forsaking balance. His non-death is a curse and a warning all in one. If you think that ambiguous shadow is disturbing, Wait until you learn about the next boss's claim to immortality. Gil. Gil is the definition of a boss who refuses to die, or at least refuses to stay dead. As leader of the Illuminati, Street Fighter's shadowy puppet masters, he's wrapped in fire and ice. Half his body burns red, the other half is encased in blue ice. This isn't just for show. It's a visual metaphor for his mastery over elemental resurrection powers, letting him rewrite defeat itself. Before you dismiss this as a gameplay gimmick, hear me out. Gil's signature resurrection super ties directly into the lore, meaning when you drain his health to zero, that's not the end. Unless you take special steps, he comes back to life, forcing you to beat him twice in one fight. This mechanic symbolizes a core truth. Killing Gil canonically is basically impossible. In the story, Alex is the only fighter who's ever claimed to defeat Gil, a win often treated as a canonical turning point. But here's where it gets weird. Even when beaten, Gil never truly dies. His regeneration kicks in, and he returns physically and ideologically intact. It's like trying to knock down the Illuminati itself. You might slay the figurehead, but the system endures. Gil's endurance represents a deeper theme. Street Fighter rarely spells out. Some powers aren't destroyed by punches or combos. They exist beyond death, embedded in ideas, institutions, and beliefs. He's the messianic villain embodying ideological endurance, not just personal invincibility. This delayed death keeps Gil a looming presence well past Shadaloo and Bison's defeat. He's the late timeline boss representing entrenched systemic power, the kind you can't wipe out with one knockout, but must dismantle piece by piece. So your win over Gil? It's temporary, a brief pause in a longer war. His defeat tests fighters, but leaves open the bigger question. Can any one fighter really end the Illuminati's reign? If you think Gil's story is confusing, wait until you meet Seth and his artificial quest for dominance. Seth is the ultimate tech Frankenstein of Street Fighter, a synthetic lifeform powered by the Tandon engine, a ruthless data-hungry core designed to absorb and replicate every fighting style on the planet. Unlike your average final boss with a vendetta, Seth isn't driven by personal motives or dark energy. He's essentially a walking, jacked-up AI prototype created by SIN, Shadaloo's weapon R&D arm gone rogue. The goal? To become the perfect fighter by stealing moves from the best, from Ryu's Hadouken to Bison's Psycho Crusher, literally making him the sum of every warrior's power. Before you tune out, Seth's downfall is more than just a generic villain get-down story. His destruction shows the inherent weakness of artificialized power. His Tandon engine core, this viral data-absorbing beast, is as unstable as it is powerful. In Street Fighter 4, after his sprawling tournament trap designed to feed his engine with fighter data, Seth is ultimately defeated when this core is destroyed in battle. The collapse of that heart meant more than just one body dying. It marked the total failure of the SIEN as an initiative, crippling the shadowy organization behind him. But Seth doesn't just disappear cleanly. The aftermath plays out across expanded storylines where Seth's failures leave Shadaloo scrambling, and remnants of his technology leak into new threats. Bison's lingering control and Jury's ruthless mission to eliminate related experiments keep the chaos bubbling. It's like a high-tech zombie saga where the monster's influence haunts every corner, proving no clone or AI can outsmart raw human spirit indefinitely. Here's the kicker. Seth's narrative death highlights the limits of cold, mechanical replication of power. No matter how many moves you download or bodies you reboot into, artificial strength collapses without balance, purpose, or soul. Seth's defeat tells us that the ultimate fighting spirit can't be copied, it has to be earned. And as wild as his digital Frankenstein story gets, this collapse sets the stage for the rise of darker, more metaphysical threats. If you thought Seth was a terrifying tech nightmare, just wait until we get to Evil Ryu, where the fight is not over data, but over the very soul of the fighter himself. Evil Ryu isn't your typical final boss who gets punched and falls over. He's more of a dark shadow lurking inside Ryu himself. This version of Ryu represents him giving in fully to the Satsu no Hado, that murderous energy that tempts fighters toward destruction and rage. But here's the twist. Evil Ryu's death is not about a body collapsing in the ring. It's a spiritual rejection of that dark path, a complete refusal to let that version of himself live. Before you write him off as just a what-if character, consider that Evil Ryu embodies a potential future for Ryu that series lore strongly warns against. His appearances are mostly in ambiguous or non-canonical settings, like secret bosses or alternate endings, where he shows what happens if Ryu lets killing intent control him totally. In Street Fighter Alpha 2 and Alpha 3, Evil Ryu is a hidden boss and a playable character who battles powerful foes, but never canonically kills M. Bison or stands over Shin Akuma. Those climactic moments belong to other versions like Shin Akuma or Evil Ryu's various fan interpretations. Think of Evil Ryu's fights as cautionary glimpses rather than fixed facts. What really marks Evil Ryu's end is the spiritual sealing by Guken, Ryu's master, who uses the power of nothingness, Mu no Ken, to imprison the Satsui no Hado inside Ryu, blocking it from overtaking his soul. This isn't a fight where Evil Ryu collapses from a punch. It's more like an exorcism where the darkness is locked away, never fully allowed to surface as the main Ryu. Ryu's growth in Street Fighter V, defeating Bison without tapping into murderous intent at all, confirms that the Dark Ryu was a possibility that got shut down before it could fully bloom. So instead of thinking about Evil Ryu dying in a traditional sense, see it as a story about purification and restraint. His defeat symbolizes Ryu choosing balance over power gained through anger. It's an internal victory, a rejection of temptation that could have consumed him. Sure, Evil Ryu keeps coming back as a fan favorite form in extra modes, but canonically, he's a shadow that's been shut back into the dark. But if you think battling internal demons is intense, wait until we look at Oni, the monstrous form of Akuma that turns all control to chaos. Oni is the final, ultimate transformation of Akuma after he fully surrenders to the Satsui no Hado, the murderous energy that corrupts fighters in Street Fighter's darkest corners. This isn't just Akuma with a power-up. Oni represents a complete loss of humanity, a demonic being where all restraint and personal identity have been consumed by raw, destructive intent. Imagine Akuma at his most feral and unstoppable, a literal embodiment of death and destruction wrapped in glowing, otherworldly power. But here's the kicker. Oni only appears as a secret boss in challenge modes. He never surfaces in any canonical story. No cutscene confirms his existence, no character ever acknowledges fighting, or even seeing Oni outside of players unlocking him as a hidden encounter. His presence is purely hypothetical, a narrative warning of what could happen if Akuma fully gave in to darkness without limit. Think of Oni less as a villain who lived and died in the Street Fighter universe, and more as a cautionary future that must not happen. The heroes, Ryu, Guken, and others, symbolically prevent this catastrophe by resisting the full consumption of the Satsui no Hado. Oni's defeat, then, is conceptual. The very fact that this form has not taken over Akuma's soul means the fighters have effectively killed this version of him before it could arise. Players can beat Oni countless times, but those victories exist in a non-canonical gameplay space. There's no official story resolution where Oni is sealed away or destroyed, because his whole point is as an apocalyptic what-if scenario, a mirror reflecting the dangers of chasing power without balance. His moveset and terrifying design embody the penultimate power trip, but his death is purely theoretical, one born of heroes' choices to resist inward darkness rather than a physical battle lost in the wild. So Oni stands as a somber myth inside Street Fighter lore, the endpoint for anyone who lets fury and killing intent rule complete. Beat him in the game, sure, but in story terms, Oni is the shadow that says, this is the future we must never allow. Next up, if you think Oni's horror is complete surrender, wait until you see the cruel precision of Shin Akuma. Shin Akuma is basically Akuma turned up to an all-consuming force of destructive power, the purest expression of the Satsui no Hado unleashed without transforming into the full Oni demon. He represents that terrifying edge of Akuma's murderous intent, the point where raw killing spirit distills into ultimate combat prowess. This isn't your everyday boss fight. Shin Akuma usually appears as a secret or bonus boss triggered by specific hidden conditions, like in Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold or other special versions of the series. Now, here's the kicker. Shin Akuma's death is never treated as a canonical event in any official story mode. Unlike true final bosses with full narrative closure, Shin Akuma's defeat only happens in gameplay encounters, making his losses more about player skill than plot development. Every time you take him down, it's a badge of mastering the game's hardest challenges, not a story moment. For instance, there's no official Alpha 3 ending showing Shin Akuma defeated by Evil Ryu. Fans have imagined or created that scene, but it doesn't exist in Capcom's canon. Instead, that idea serves as a symbolic fan interpretation of what would happen if these ultimate Satsui no Hado warriors clashed, not a true storyline event. The truth is, Shin Akuma's role is almost metatextual. He's the ultimate gatekeeper for players seeking to prove themselves against Akuma's full, deadly potential without crossing into demonic Oni territory. His repeated defeats are a signpost of skill and perseverance, a ritual challenge standing between casual players and the mastery elite. From a lore perspective, Shin Akuma occupies this gray zone between gameplay legend and canonical reality. Capcom treats him more like a gameplay concept. There is no powered-up Shin Akuma form triggered by taunts or commands in Street Fighter 6. That's fan myth blending with game mechanics, but not official. So, while Shin Akuma never truly dies in story, every player conquest acts like a ritual sacrifice to the gods of mastery. He's not a final boss you slay once and for all. He's a Dark Summit gamers keep climbing, falling off, and striving to conquer again. If you think beating one tough boss is satisfying, wait until you see the enigmatic JP, who takes villainy in a completely different direction. JP is a totally different beast compared to the bombastic villains before in Street Fighter. Instead of running a criminal empire with theatrical schemes, he's more of a modern corporate-style mastermind, blending ruthless business tactics with a psycho-magical energy that looks like M. Bison's psycho power, but isn't quite the same. He wields this eerie lilac energy to summon spikes, projectiles, and portals, controlling space with chilling precision. Imagine a shadowy CEO suddenly throwing knives made of psychic force. His main domain is the fictional nation of Nashal, which he manipulates through financial leverage, political puppeteering, and covert violence. Bosch, the closest thing Street Fighter VI has to a classical hero, becomes obsessed with stopping JP. The game's climax has Bosch and the player teaming up to break JP's grip on Nashal. But unlike past bosses who exploded in flashy finales, JP's defeat is muted and ambiguous. He often just collapses under the strain of his unstable power or loses control of his psychic forces. The story leaves open the idea he might still be lurking, pulling strings behind the scenes. Here's the thing, JP's fall feels less like a heroic victory over a clear villain, and more like dismantling a shadow network deeply woven into global finance, law, and corruption. Whereas M. Bison's reign ended with a supernatural breakdown, JP's defeat reveals villainy embedded in everyday power structures. That makes it hard to say JP is truly dead in any satisfying way. The cold systemic corruption he represents doesn't vanish with him. Critics and fans note how JP's ambiguous demise contrasts sharply with earlier bosses. None of those flamboyant final blows, marking clear chapters here. Instead, it's a slow bleed. The corrupt system fractures, but the disease lingers. This echoes real-world cynicism about fighting entrenched global powers, making JP feel less like a cartoon villain and more a mirror of modern anxieties about invisible influence. Narratively, JP bridges Street Fighter's villains into a more complex era. Battles aren't just about beating tyrants, but wrestling systemic rot you can't punch away. His defeat ends the immediate crisis in Nashal, but leaves open the unsettling idea that this corruption could resurface elsewhere anytime. So, unlike the explosive psycho power dust that took down Bison, or the brutal finality of past bosses, JP's downfall is deliberately unresolved. His legacy reminds us that sometimes evil isn't a person to kill, it's a system to dismantle, and that's a much messier fight. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.